The moment Mira stepped into the clearing, she felt it. Not a sound, not a signal. Something deeper than either. A pull from the center of her chest, like a hook set into her ribs from the other side of the firelight. She had heard older women in the pack describe the mate bond before. They used soft words, words like warmth, like recognition, like coming home. None of those words were big enough for what hit her standing at the edge of the Blood Moon Assembly, with pine needles under her feet, and 200 wolves packed into the clearing ahead. It was not warmth. It was a detonation. Her hand flew to her sternum. She pressed her palm flat against her own heartbeat, as though she could hold herself together from the outside. Around her, bodies moved and voices rose, and someone laughed too loudly near the far bonfire. None of it reached her. She was standing perfectly still in the middle of a crowd, and the crowd had ceased to exist. Her eyes found him without trying. Alpha Callum Voss. He stood near the stone platform at the center of the clearing, where the pack elders conducted the formal proceedings of the Blood Moon Assembly each year. He was tall enough that she could see him over the heads of the people between them, with dark hair that caught the orange light of the bonfire, and broad shoulders that held stillness the way a wall holds stillness. He was not scanning the crowd. He was not looking for anyone. Then he turned. His eyes came directly to her. No searching, no delay, as though he had known exactly where she was standing from the moment she arrived, had simply been waiting for the right second to look. Mira had lived inside this pack her entire life. 22 years in Thornfield, in the Eastern Territory, in the lower ranks where Omegas with no bloodline distinction went unnoticed most of the time and preferred it. She had attended every Blood Moon Assembly since her 16th year, as pack law required. She had watched other wolves find their mates across crowded clearings, had watched the recognition move across their faces like a light being switched on. She had always believed, in the quiet and private part of herself, that she did not show anyone, that it would not happen to her, not because she was unworthy of it, simply because some people's lives moved in that direction and some did not, and she had made a reasonable peace with not knowing which kind of life was hers. Now Callum Voss was looking at her from across a firelit clearing, and the bond between them was so loud she could not hear her own thoughts. She made herself breathe. In, slow, out slow. She was aware of her hands, of the cold air on her forearms, of the sound of her own pulse. She was aware of the exact distance between herself and the Alpha, 40 feet, roughly, though it felt like nothing, like the distance was already dissolving, and she was aware that every second she stood still was a second she was not doing something stupid. She did not move toward him. He moved toward her. The crowd parted for him the way it always did, without anyone deciding to part, without anyone being asked. That was the nature of an Alpha's presence. Callum Voss had led Thornfield Pack for 6 years, since his father's death, and in those 6 years Mira had seen him at assemblies, at territory runs. At the occasional pack dinner she was too low in the hierarchy to be seated near. She knew his face the way she knew the layout of the packland, from a respectful and unremarkable distance. She did not know the way he walked toward someone when the bond had just sealed. She was learning it now. He stopped 2 arm lengths away, close enough that she could see his eyes clearly in the firelight, dark, steady, carrying something she could not immediately name. Not joy exactly, not the bright and open expression she had seen on the faces of newly bonded wolves at past assemblies. Something more complicated than that. Something that looked like a man who had just received news he had not been prepared for, and was managing the surprise with the discipline that 6 years of Alpha leadership had built into him. "You feel it," he said, not a question. "Yes," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. The bond hummed between them, present and undeniable, filling the space between their bodies like a sound just below the threshold of hearing. Around them the assembly continued. Voices, laughter, the crack of the bonfire, and none of it touched the strange, suspended quiet that had formed around the two of them. "What is your name?" he asked. "Mira," she said. "Mira Langston." He repeated it. Just her name. The way he said it made her chest tighten in a way she did not know how to categorize yet. She waited for whatever came next. She had heard that the formal acknowledgement happened quickly when the bond was clear, when both parties felt it and both parties were willing. A public declaration before the elders. A beginning. Callum Voss was quiet for too long. She noticed it, the way the silence stretched past what felt natural, past what the moment seemed to call for. His jaw was set. His eyes had not left her face, but they had changed somehow. The calculation in them had sharpened into something that looked almost like pain. "Mira Langston," he said again. "Yes," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I reject you." The words were quiet, conversational almost, like he was telling her something practical, like he was reading an item off a list. The bond did not break. That was the part no one had ever told her. She had assumed, in her vague and distant thinking about the mate bond, that rejection would simply end it, that the alpha could say those two words and the thing that had detonated in her chest would simply stop. It did not stop. It frayed. The sensation was not like something ending. It was like something being cut with a dull instrument, serrated and slow and deeply wrong. She felt it in her sternum, in her spine, in the backs of her hands. She felt it the way she imagined it would feel to have a splinter removed by someone who kept stopping halfway. She did not make a sound. She stood very still, the way she had learned to stand still under difficult things, and she looked at Callum Voss's face and she waited to understand what was happening. His expression had not changed. It was controlled, careful, the face of a man executing a decision he had already made. That was the part that cut deepest, not the words, but the absence of surprise in him, the way this had not been an impulse, the way it was something he had prepared for. She wanted to ask him why. The question was there, fully formed, sitting behind her teeth. She was aware of it the same way she was aware of the fraying ache in her chest, present, insistent, demanding acknowledgement. She did not ask. Not because she was afraid of the answer, because she understood, in some cold and clear-eyed part of herself that had been forged by 22 years of moving carefully through a world that did not always have space for her, that the answer was not hers to have right now. Maybe not ever, that he had made this choice before she arrived in this clearing, before she felt the bond, before she even knew his name in her bones, and he had made it without her, and he had not thought to include her in it. She nodded once, precisely, like punctuation. Then she turned and walked back the way she had come. The crowd was thick near the outer edge of the clearing. She moved through it with her head level and her shoulders straight, and she did not make eye contact with anyone. And she did not stop when she heard her friend Lena call her name from somewhere to the left. And she did not stop when the bonfire light fell away, and the trees closed around her, and the sounds of the assembly grew distant behind her. She walked for a long time. The night was cold. Thornfield's eastern territory was high ground, close enough to the mountains that the autumn air carried real teeth in it after dark. She had not brought a coat to the assembly. She noticed the cold the way she noticed the ache in her chest, as information, useful and dull and not something she was going to let slow her down right now. She ended up at the river. The Thornfield Pack's eastern boundary ran along the Colby River, wide, shallow, fast-moving, silver in the moonlight. She had come here as a child when the pack house felt too loud, too full of other people's expectations. She had come here as a teenager when the weight of being low-ranked and careful and always watchful had pressed too hard against the inside of her skin. She came here now without deciding to, the way you go to the places your body knows. She sat on the flat rock near the second bend, where the water ran fast around a cluster of older stones, and she put her feet on the cold ground and her hands in her lap, and she felt the frayed edge of what had been done to her. It did not feel like grief. She had expected grief. She was not sure what to call what she actually felt. It was quieter than grief and stranger than anger, and it had no center she could press on and release. It simply lived in her chest, persistent, like a question that had been asked in a language she was still learning. She stayed there until the moon shifted and the air grew colder and she heard, from somewhere back through the trees, the sound of the assembly beginning to wind down, voices carrying on the wind, the low murmur of a crowd dispersing. She heard footsteps on the path before she heard anything else. She turned her head. A man came around the bend in the path. He was wearing a dark jacket and moving carefully, not loudly, the way someone moves when they are trying not to startle a person who is sitting alone in the dark. She recognized him after a moment, not because she knew him well, but because she had seen him at enough pack functions to know the shape of him. Declan Voss, Callum's younger brother, second beta of Thornfield Pack. 3 years younger than Callum, which put him at roughly her own age, and quieter than his brother in the way that some people are quiet, not from absence but from choice, from the habit of watching more than speaking. He stopped a few feet away. He did not sit down. He did not say anything immediately, which she noted with a dull kind of appreciation, because she did not have any words available at the moment and was not prepared to receive any. He looked at the river. She looked at the river. After a long silence, he said, "I saw you leave." "I know," she said. Another silence. The river moved over the stones. "I'm not here to explain anything," he said. "Good," she said. He sat down then, not close, not so far away that the gesture became strange. A neutral distance. The distance of someone who understood that proximity needed to be earned right now, and was not going to push for anything that had not been offered. She looked at his profile in the dark. He was looking at the water. His jaw was tight in a way that was not aimed at her. "You know why," she said. It was not a question. She said it because she had already understood, from the controlled way Callum had delivered those two words, from the prepared look in his eyes, that this had not been improvised. And if it had not been improvised, the people closest to the Alpha would have known it was coming. Declan was quiet for a moment, then, "Yes. And you're not going to tell me." "Not tonight," he said. She turned back to the river. Not tonight was not the same as never. She held that distinction carefully, the way you hold something small and important when your hands are not entirely steady. "Go home, Mira," he said. Not unkindly, not dismissively. The way someone says a thing when they mean it as a mercy and know it will not feel like one. She stood. She brushed the cold off her hands. Wimone. She looked at him once more. This man she barely knew who had come to find her in the dark beside a river after his brother had taken something from her without explanation. "Why did you come here?" she asked. He thought about it. She watched him think about it, watched him decide between more than one version of the truth. "Because someone should have," he said. She walked back through the trees alone. The assembly grounds were emptying. The bonfires were burning low. No one stopped her. No one asked her anything. She moved through the thinning crowd with the frayed ache still sitting in her chest, steady and strange and absolutely refusing to stop, and she told herself that she was fine, that she would be fine, that she had been managing hard things for a long time and this was simply one more. She was almost to the road when she heard the sound. Two men, arguing, somewhere behind the main fire pit, in the shadow of the trees where the assembly's outer torches did not reach. She recognized one voice immediately, low, controlled, the voice of someone keeping a very tight lid on something that wanted to be louder. Callum. She could not make out words, only tone, only the shape of whatever was happening between the two of them, the tight, compressed quality of a conversation that had been waiting to happen, and was now happening badly. The second voice she did not recognize. Not Declan, someone else. She did not stop walking. She noted the sound the way you note the smell of smoke, as information, as the edge of something larger, as a detail that would matter later even if it did not make sense yet. She went home. She sat in her kitchen with the lights on and a cup of tea she did not drink and the frayed end of a bond that had existed for less than an hour, and had already been taken from her by a man who had looked at her like she was a decision rather than a person. She did not cry. She thought about Declan Voss sitting beside her on the flat rock, looking at the river, saying because someone should have. She thought about the way Callum's voice had sounded in the dark behind the assembly grounds, and the second voice she had not recognized, and the argument that had been shaped like something urgent and old and unresolved. She finished her tea cold. She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time, and when she finally did, she dreamed of the river and the sound of fast water over old stones. And in the dream she was not alone on the flat rock, but she could not see who was sitting beside her, only that the weight of their presence felt like something she had not realized she needed until it was already there. She woke before dawn. The ache was still in her chest. Of course it was. She got up anyway. She made coffee. She stood at her kitchen window and watched the pale gray light come into the eastern sky above the tree line, slow and indifferent and entirely unconcerned with what had happened to her the night before. Pack law was something she had always understood in the abstract. Rules that governed wolves in large territories, rules that had evolved over generations to keep order and safety inside communities where strength was a genuine physical reality and hierarchy was not a metaphor. She had been raised on those rules. She had followed them her whole life without needing to think about them too carefully, because they had never pointed directly at her. Now one of them was pointing directly at her. A rejected Omega, under pack law, was required to be placed under the formal protection of another ranked male in the pack within 7 days, or she would be required to leave pack territory entirely. It was a law she had heard of in a theoretical sense. She had known, in the distant and uninvested way she had known many things, that it existed. She had never expected to need to know it well. The coffee was too hot. She drank it anyway and looked at the pine trees in the early morning dark and thought, with great precision and very little emotion, about what her options actually were. She had no father living. Her mother had left the pack 8 years ago following a man south, and Mira had not heard from her in 6. She had friends. Lena, warm and practical. Owen, good-humored and reliable, but neither of them was ranked high enough to offer formal protection. She had her work, her place in the pack's eastern medical station where she had spent the last 3 years as a trained herbalist and general aid worker. She had her small house at the edge of the territory, her flat rock by the river, her quiet life that she had built carefully and with her own hands. What she did not have, she realized, finishing the last of her coffee, was a good plan. She was still standing at the window when she heard the knock. 3 knocks, measured, not urgent. The knock of someone who had decided to come here and was not embarrassed about it. She went to the door. She opened it. Declan Voss stood on her front step in the early gray light, still in the same dark jacket he had been wearing at the river. He looked like he had not slept. There was a directness in his eyes that the dark had softened last night and the morning had made plain. "I know it's early," he said. "It is," she said. He looked at her steadily. "May I come in?" She stood back from the door. He stepped inside. He sat at her kitchen table like a man who had done it before, though he had not. She would have remembered. She put the kettle on because it gave her something to do with her hands, and because standing in her own kitchen, while a virtual stranger made himself quietly at home in it, felt like a situation that required at least the performance of ordinary behavior. Declan Voss looked around her kitchen without making it into a thing. He took in the herb bundles hanging from the low beam, the organized row of labeled jars on the shelf above the counter, the worn copy of a field guide to northern plants sitting open on the windowsill. He looked at those things the way someone looks at a room they are trying to understand, not to catalog. "You're the one who works at the Eastern Medical Station," he said. 3 years, she said. "I didn't think you knew that." "Most people in this pack don't pay enough attention to what keeps them healthy," he said. It was not a compliment exactly. It was an observation delivered without any particular softness, and she found she respected that. The kettle began to hiss. She kept her back to him and reached for 2 mugs, and she said, "Why are you here, Declan?" She heard the small shift of him adjusting in the chair. "Because pack law gives you 7 days and you have no one in the rank structure to petition on your behalf." "I know what the law says." "I know you know," he said. "I'm here because there is a solution, and someone needs to offer it to you clearly, instead of letting you spend the next week trying to find it yourself." She turned around. He was looking at her directly. No evasion in it. The kind of eye contact that most people break first. "You," she said. "Me," he said. She set the mugs on the counter. She looked at him. He was tall sitting down, the kind of tall that did not need to perform itself, and his hands were folded on her table, in a way that suggested patience rather than waiting. There was a bruise forming along his left jaw that had not been there at the river. She had not noticed it in the early morning light when he was standing at her door, but the kitchen lamp caught it clearly, and it was fresh. "What happened to your face?" she asked. A pause, brief. "Last night got complicated," he said. She filed that away. She poured the hot water and brought both mugs to the table and sat down across from him, and she wrapped her hands around her own mug, and she said, "Explain what you're offering." "Formal protective designation," he said. "Second beta rank is sufficient to fulfill the legal requirement. You would stay in your house. You would keep your work at the station. Nothing about your daily life would change practically. This is about the structure, not the day-to-day. And what do you get from it?" she asked. He looked at her steadily. "Nothing," he said. She did not believe him, not because she thought he was lying, but because nothing was never the real answer when someone drove to a woman's house before dawn to offer her a solution she had not asked for. There was always something, a reason, a motivation, even if it was as simple as a conscience that would not let him sleep. "Try again," she said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, the near miss of one. "I sleep better when things are handled," he said. "That's more honest," she said. They sat with that for a moment. Outside, the gray light had shifted slightly. A bird called once in the pines and was answered by nothing. "You knew he was going to do it," she said. It was not a question. The way her statement at the river had not been a question. She was not asking. She was telling him that she had already arrived at this conclusion, and she needed him to decide what to do with that. Declan was quiet for exactly the amount of time a careful man takes to choose between honesty and protection, when the two are in conflict. "Yes," he said. "And you didn't stop it." "No," he said. And then, before she could respond, "I tried." She looked at the bruise on his jaw. He did not look away. She breathed out slowly. The frayed ache in her chest was still there. She had checked for it when she woke up, the way you check a wound in the morning to see how it has settled overnight. It had not healed. It had simply gone from acute to chronic, from a sharp thing to a dull thing, from something that demanded her attention every second to something that simply lived in her now like a stone she had swallowed. "If I accept your offer," she said, "and I need you to understand that I have not decided anything yet." "Of course," he said. "If I accept it, I need to know that it is exactly what you have described. A formal designation, a legal structure, not a claim. He met her eyes. Not a claim, he said. You don't owe me anything for this. You don't owe anyone anything for this. And Callum? What about him? Will this cause problems between you? She asked. She kept her voice level. She was not asking because she cared about protecting Callum Voss from consequences. She was asking because she was a practical woman, and she needed to understand the shape of the thing she was being asked to step into. Declan was quiet again, this time longer. That's not your problem to manage, he said finally. It becomes my problem if it destabilizes the pack leadership while I am formally attached to the second beta, she said. He looked at her with something that was not quite surprise but was adjacent to it, the slight recalibration of someone who had underestimated the person across from them and was quietly acknowledging it. Fair, he said. I'll handle it. She drank her tea. It was too hot still, but she drank it anyway, because the physical sensation of it was useful right now, something concrete to put her attention on, while the rest of her sorted through the options available to her. She thought about leaving the territory. She thought about it carefully, the way she always thought carefully about alternatives before dismissing them. She had enough savings. She had skills that were useful in any pack. Her work in herbal medicine and wound care was not specific to Thornfield. She could petition for a transfer to another territory. She could start again somewhere new. She was aware, sitting at her own table in her own kitchen with the herb bundles above her head and the field guide on the windowsill, that she did not want to do that. This was her home. She had built it with her own hands, not metaphorically but literally. She had spent a summer 3 years ago replacing the rotted back wall of this house herself, with Owen's help and Lena's opinions and her own stubbornness. She had planted the garden at the back. She had worn paths in the pine duff on the trails between her house and the medical station and the river. She was not going to leave because an alpha had decided to make a choice about her life without consulting her. When do you need an answer? She asked. Take the day, he said. Take 2 days. The 7-day window gives you room. She nodded. She looked at him across the table, this man who had come to find her in the dark at the river, and then come back in the gray of early morning, with a solution he had probably spent the night working out, and she said, "Who was the second voice?" He looked at her. "At the assembly," he said. It was not a question either. He understood immediately. "Behind the bonfire," she said. "After I left, I heard Callum arguing with someone. A moment, a very careful moment. A man named Walter Graves," Declan said. She did not know the name. "Who is he?" "That's a longer conversation," he said. "Is it relevant to why Callum rejected me?" "Yes," he said. "Then I will need to have that conversation at some point." "Yes," he said again. "You will, not today." She accepted that. For now, she refiled the name, Walter Graves, in the part of her mind she used for things that were not urgent but were important, things she would need to return to when the time was right and the shape of the situation was clearer. Declan drank the last of his tea. He put the mug down on her table with the careful precision of someone in an unfamiliar space who is trying to be considerate of it, and he stood. "One more thing," he said. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and set a folded piece of paper on the table. "The formal designation form. I've already signed it. If you decide to accept, you fill in your information and sign it, and I submit it to the elders. You don't have to hand it to me personally. You can leave it at the pack office." She looked at the folded paper. It was already filled out on his side, she realized. He had done that before coming here. Before she had said yes. He had prepared the paperwork on the assumption that she would agree, or on the assumption that she should at least have the option fully in her hands before she decided. She was not sure which interpretation was more interesting. "Thank you for the tea," he said. "Thank you for the paper," she said. He went to the door. He opened it himself. He stepped out into the early morning and she stood in her doorway and watched him walk back down the path toward the road, his hands in his jacket pockets, his steps unhurried, the bruise on his jaw catching the growing light. She went back inside. She put his mug in the sink and rinsed it. She looked at the folded paper on her table. She did not pick it up yet. She went to her bedroom and changed into her work clothes, and she braided her hair in front of the mirror without looking at herself too hard, and she went to the Eastern Medical Station. Lena was already there when she arrived. Lena Price was short, practical, chronically optimistic, and the closest thing Mira had to a best friend in the pack. She had dark eyes and a quick manner, and the specific gift of being able to tell when Mira needed to be left alone versus when Mira needed to be asked something directly. This gift had taken her several years to develop, and Mira valued it tremendously. She looked up from the supply inventory she was doing when Mira walked in. She took in Mira's face. She said, "How bad?" "Somewhere in the middle," Mira said. Lena put down her clipboard. "I saw you leave," she said. "I tried to follow, but I lost you at the outer ring. I was at the river." Lena nodded. She did not press. She waited. "He rejected the bond," Mira said. A silence. Not the silence of someone without anything to say, but the silence of someone giving a devastating thing its proper weight. "Callum Voss," Lena said. "Yes." "I'm sorry," Lena said. And then she said something that Mira had not expected, something that was so precisely right that it made Mira's throat tighten. "It's not about you. Whatever his reason is, it is not about you." Mira looked at her for a moment. "Declan Voss came to my house this morning." Lena's expression shifted. "What?" He offered formal protective designation. Lena was very still. She was doing the kind of rapid calculation that intelligent people do when unexpected information lands in an existing picture, and the picture has to be reassembled. Mira watched her do it. "He came before you even asked," Lena said. "Before I even woke up," Mira said. Lena was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, "Are you going to accept?" "I haven't decided." "But you're thinking about it." "Yes," Mira said. "I'm thinking about it." She went to the supply room and started her morning inventory. The physical routine of it was welcome. The counting, the organizing, the simple task of knowing what was there and what was needed. She had always done her best thinking in motion. In the middle of small and manageable tasks, she thought better with her hands busy. She thought about Declan sitting at her table in the early morning light, about the way he had said nothing is never the real answer, and she had pushed him, and he had given her something more honest. About the bruise on his jaw that he had not explained except to say that last night got complicated, and the way he had not flinched when she looked at it. She thought about the folded paper on her kitchen table, with his signature already on it. By the time she had finished the inventory and started the first round of appointments, 2 pack members with minor injuries from a territory patrol, 1 elder with a recurring joint condition she had been managing with tinctures for 18 months. She had made her decision. She finished her last appointment at midday. She went home for lunch. She sat at her table. She picked up the folded paper. She opened it. She read every line. The language was formal, dry, exactly what a legal protection document should be. No ambiguity. No room for misinterpretation. No language that suggested anything beyond what had been explicitly discussed. She found that she was looking for catches and not finding them, which was not the same as certainty, but was close enough for now. She took a pen from the drawer. She filled in her name, her date of birth, her rank, her address. She signed it. She folded it back along its original creases. She did not take it to the pack office. She walked to Declan's house. She had not been inside it before, but she knew where it was. A house on the northern side of the territory, larger than hers, set back from the road in the older part of the pack's residential area where the trees were bigger, and the houses had been standing longer. She had passed it before without having a reason to stop. She stopped now. She knocked. He answered quickly, which told her he had not been sleeping. He looked at her for a moment, then at the folded paper in her hand. She held it out. He took it. "Are you sure?" he said. "I am practical," she said. "I am not going to leave my home, and I believe you when you say what this is and what it isn't." He looked at her steadily. "I meant what I said this morning." "I know," she said. He folded the paper into his jacket pocket. He stood in his doorway the way she had stood in hers, with the door open, not blocking the step, not pressing. "I'll submit it today," he said. "Good," she said. She turned to leave. "Mira," he said. She turned back. He was looking at her with something she could not quite read, something quiet and careful, and directed specifically at her, not at the situation, not at the form in his pocket, at her. "I'm sorry he didn't tell you why," he said. "You deserve to know." She held his gaze. She felt the frayed ache in her chest, present and persistent, and she felt the particular quality of what he had just said, which was an apology that was not his to give, and he was giving it anyway. "Yes," she said, "I did." She walked back through the pine trees with her hands in her pockets and the midday light coming thin through the branches overhead, and she breathed the cold air and she thought about what she had just agreed to, and she told herself, carefully and deliberately, that she was doing this because it was logical, and because she was not a person who abandoned things she had built. She told herself that. She believed it entirely. She was back at the medical station by early afternoon. She worked until dark. She went home. She cooked dinner from the things in her kitchen. She sat at the table where Declan had sat that morning, and she ate her meal, and she looked out the window at the dark trees. Her chest still ached. But the edge of the ache was different now. Still there, still real, but no longer the edge of something falling. More like the edge of something that had found, for now, a place to land. 3 weeks passed. They were not easy weeks, but they were functional ones, which was, Mira had decided long ago, the most honest thing you could say about most of life. It functioned. You got up, you did the work, you came home. The frayed ache in her chest was still there every morning when she opened her eyes, present and unavoidable as the cold air, but it had begun to feel less like an intrusion and more like weather, something she moved through rather than something that stopped her. The formal protective designation had gone through without incident. The pack elders had recorded it, noted it, filed it away with the same bureaucratic efficiency they brought to everything, and life had continued. No one made a spectacle of it. A few people talked, she knew because Lena told her, with the blunt accuracy of a good friend, but the talking was the ordinary kind that pack communities produced around unusual arrangements, and it faded within a week. What did not fade was Declan. Not because he pressed, not because he made himself present in ways that demanded attention. He did the opposite, in fact. He was careful about his presence in a way that she noticed precisely because most people were not careful about that kind of thing. He checked in every few days. A brief visit to the medical station, a short walk when their paths crossed on the territory, once a knock at her door to let her know there was a pack meeting she was entitled to attend as a formally designated member under his rank. He did not overstay these moments. He did not fill them with unnecessary conversation. He seemed to understand, without being told, that she needed the situation to be what it said it was, clean, structured, clearly defined, before she could think about what, if anything, it might also be. The thing was that she had begun to find him interesting, not in the way the bond had made Callum suddenly and overwhelmingly the most important thing in the room. That had been biology and fate, instantaneous and enormous and ultimately, painfully, not hers to keep. This was different. This was the slow accumulation of small observations, the way you build a picture of a person not from one revelatory moment, but from many ordinary ones. She noticed that he read. Real books, not screens. She had seen them at his house on the one occasion she had been inside, stacked with the focused disorder of someone who followed interest rather than system. She noticed that he was specific in his language, that he chose words carefully and did not use more of them than the moment required. She noticed that he was funny, sometimes, in the dry and unexpected way that caught her off guard because he did not advertise it. She noticed the bruise on his jaw had healed, and he had not explained it further. She noticed that he never mentioned Callum, unless she brought Callum up first. She noticed that she had stopped bringing Callum up. It was a Tuesday evening. Cold, overcast, the kind of evening that suggested winter was no longer a threat but a promise, when Declan stopped by the medical station as she was closing up. He was carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the small pack canteen that operated out of the community hall, and he offered one to her without making it into anything more than a person who happened to have coffee and happened to be there. She took the cup. They sat on the low wooden steps outside the station's side door, which faced east, away from the main path, toward the tree line and the beginning of the territory's quieter trails. The coffee was strong and too sweet, the way the canteen always made it, and she drank half of it and was grateful for it. I heard there was a difficult situation at the station this week, he said. A child with a compound fracture, she said. She's going to be fine, but it was a bad few hours. How old? 7, she said. She was very brave about it, more than most adults. He was quiet for a moment. Children usually are, he said. They haven't learned yet that being brave is supposed to be hard. She looked at him. He was looking at the tree line. The gray evening light made the lines of his face distinct. The straight line of his jaw, the slight hollowing below his cheekbone, the way his brow was set not in tension but in thought. That's a bleak reading of adulthood, she said. It's an honest one, he said. Then, glancing at her, you're going to tell me optimism is also honest. I wasn't going to say that, she said. I was going to say that most adults are brave all the time. They've just been taught to apologize for it. He looked at her for a moment. The near miss of a smile again. She was starting to recognize it. The particular quality of his attention when something had surprised or pleased him, and he was managing it without making a show of it. You're going to make a good case for that, he said. Lena, she said. She works double shifts when we're understaffed, and she never mentions it. Owen runs the Eastern Patrol twice a week, and he's been doing it for 4 years without a day off, and he'd be embarrassed if you thanked him. Those are the ordinary people. They're brave constantly. It just doesn't have a name. Declan was quiet for a moment, then, I hadn't thought of it that way. Most people in the rank structure don't, she said, without heat. Just an observation. He accepted it. That was something she had noticed about him. He did not get defensive when she said things that might be taken as criticism of his position. He took them in the spirit they were offered, which was the spirit of someone who had thought about something and wanted to say it plainly. Fair, he said. They finished their coffee. The temperature had dropped another degree. She could see her breath in the air when she exhaled. She ought to go home. She had notes to write up from the day's appointments, and the fire in her kitchen would not light itself. She stayed sitting on the steps. Tell me about Walter Graves, she said. Declan did not move, but something in the quality of his stillness changed, became the stillness of a man who had been waiting for this question, and was now deciding how to answer it. What do you already know? He asked. His name, that he was at the assembly, that Callum argued with him after I left. He's from the Westmere faction, Declan said. He said it slowly, like he was choosing the weight of each word. Not a pack in the traditional sense, more of an alliance. They operate about 80 miles west, in the gap between the Thornfield and Ridgeback territories. They've been expanding their influence for about 2 years. Expanding how? She asked. Political maneuvering, he said. Leverage. They identify vulnerabilities in established packs and they push on them. Financial sometimes, relational sometimes. She looked at him. And the vulnerability they identified in Thornfield? Declan was quiet. Was me, she said. He turned his head to look at her. There was something in his expression she had not seen before. Not quite pain, but the cousin of pain. The expression of someone watching another person carry toward the truth that the person deserves to have, and that will also cost them something. Not you specifically, he said. The fact that Callum didn't have a bonded mate. An alpha without a bond partner is. There are ways to use that. Leverage points. If someone threatened the person the alpha was bonded to, they could use her to control him, Mira said. Yes, Declan said. She looked at the tree line. The cold air moved through the branches. She kept her breathing steady. Walter Graves identified me, she said. Before the Blood Moon Assembly, Declan said. He communicated to Callum that if the bond happened and Callum accepted it, that you would become a target, that they would use you. She sat with that. She sat with all of it, the shape of it, the particular sharp edges of it, the way it arranged the events of that night into a pattern that was, in its own terrible way, coherent. He chose not to tell me, she said. Her voice was level. She worked to keep it level. Yes, Declan said. He decided that my safety was more important than my right to make a choice about my own safety. Yes, Declan said, more quietly. She looked down at the empty paper cup in her hands. She thought about Callum standing across a firelit clearing, looking at her with eyes that had already made a decision she had not been consulted about. She thought about the 2 words, quiet, controlled, delivered like something that had been practiced. She thought about the look on his face and the way she had read it at the time as calculation and now understood it differently, though differently did not mean better. Understanding a reason was not the same as forgiving the method. Did he think, she said, that I would be safer not knowing? That ignorance would protect me? I think he thought, Declan said carefully, that if you didn't know, you couldn't be pressed for information you didn't have. That's a kind interpretation, she said. It's the most accurate one I have, he said. She nodded. Once, slowly. And your interpretation of the right thing to do was different from his. Declan's jaw tightened briefly. I thought you should have been told. I thought you should have been given the choice. To accept the risk of the bond with full information, or to decline it. He didn't think I could handle it, she said. He didn't think it was fair to ask you to handle it, Declan said. There's a difference. He was trying to protect you from a choice that would have been unfair regardless of which direction you chose. And she looked at him. He was making Callum's case. She recognized that. She recognized it, and she also recognized that he was doing it not to defend his brother, but to give her the fullest possible picture. Because that was apparently the kind of person he was. Someone who gave you the accurate version of the thing, even when the accurate version made a complicated situation more complicated. And you? She asked. What would you have done, if it had been your decision? He met her eyes. I would have told you, and then I would have done everything in my power to make sure the threat to you was neutralized before it could be acted on. That's a lot of confidence in your ability to neutralize a threat, she said. It's a lot of confidence in your ability to carry information and make a choice, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. The cold had deepened around them. The tree line was dark now, the last light almost gone. From somewhere distant in the territory came the low sound of the evening patrol, wolves moving through the woods at the edge of their mapped land, doing the ordinary and essential work of keeping the borders steady. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "You would have found it eventually," he said. "You were going to find it." She stood. She gathered the empty cups. She looked down at him still sitting on the step, and she said, "Why did you trust me with it now? Instead of waiting?" He looked up at her. The evening had made his expression harder to read, but she was getting better at reading it. "Because you asked," he said, "and I don't lie to people who ask me directly." She stood there with 2 empty paper cups in her hands, and the cold dark settling around them and something shifting, quietly, in the space between them. Not the detonation of a blood bond, not anything so large or so loud as that. Something smaller, something that had been building without announcing itself, out of coffee on cold steps and honest conversations, and a man who showed up at her door before dawn, with paperwork he had already signed, because she should have the option fully in her hands. She went home. The fire in her kitchen lit on the second match. She wrote her appointment notes at the table. She made dinner. She sat in the warmth of her own kitchen, and she thought about what Declan had told her, laid it out in her mind with the precision she brought to her medical work. All the pieces in order. No flinching from the difficult ones. Callum had rejected her to protect her. That was true. He had done it without telling her. That was also true. Both things could be true simultaneously, and she was not required to soften either of them. She thought about Declan saying, "I would have told you, and then I would have done everything in my power." She thought about what it meant that she believed him. She was finishing her dinner when she heard a sound outside. Not a knock. A footstep on the path, the particular creak of the third board of her front path, the one she had been meaning to fix for 2 years. She knew the sound well enough to know how many people were out there. 1. She went to the window. She looked out. Callum Voss was standing at the edge of her front path, 15 feet from the door, not moving closer. He was wearing a heavy coat and he was standing with his hands at his sides and he was looking at her house with an expression she could not fully read through glass and distance. He had come back. She stood at the window and she looked at him for a long time, and he did not move, and she did not move, and the light from her kitchen fell out through the glass into the dark yard between them like something that had not decided yet whether it was a welcome or a warning. She did not go to the door. Eventually he turned. He walked back down the path toward the road, his footsteps careful on the path boards, and she heard the third board creak under his weight as he passed it, and then the sound of him was gone. She stood at the window for another minute after that. Then she went back to her dinner. It was cold. She ate it anyway. The next morning she told Lena about Callum standing outside. They were setting up the station's morning tray, the organized row of small instruments, the jars of compounds she had prepared the week before, the record books that never seemed to get shorter no matter how many entries she completed. Lena listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. Lena interrupted when she was comfortable, which meant that not interrupting was its own kind of signal. When Mira finished, Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did you feel when you saw him?" Mira considered the question. She had considered it herself, lying in bed the previous night, with the fire down to coals and the ceiling dark above her. "The frayed thing," she said. "The bond, it reacted. I noticed it, like a person turning toward a sound. But I did not go to the door," Mira said. Lena nodded slowly. "Do you want to know what I think?" "Yes," Mira said. "That is why I told you." "I think he came because he wanted to see if he still affected you," Lena said. "I think he needed to know if what he did was irreversible. And I think you standing at the window and not opening the door gave him the most honest answer available." Mira thought about that. She thought about the frayed bond, the involuntary turn toward him the way a plant turns toward light. Not a choice, just a biological fact. And she thought about the space between what your body did automatically and what you then decided to do with your own hands and feet and voice. "He'll come back," Lena said. "I know," Mira said. "What will you do when he does?" Mira picked up the first record book. She opened it to the morning's appointments. She said, "Decide in the moment." Lena opened her mouth. "I know," Mira said, before Lena could speak. "You think I should have a plan. I think you should have at least a starting position," Lena said. "My starting position," Mira said, "is that I am not responsible for managing his feelings about the consequences of his own decisions." Lena looked at her for a moment. Then she picked up her own record book and she said, "That is an excellent starting position." They went to work. It was a busy morning. 3 territory patrol injuries, all minor, nothing requiring more than basic care. and then a longer appointment with an elder who had been struggling with fatigue for 2 months, and whose condition had not improved the way Mira had expected it to. She spent an extra 30 minutes with him, going back through his history, adjusting her approach, recommending a referral to the PAC's formally trained physician for a second set of eyes. She liked this work. She had always liked it, the precision of it, the way it required her to hold multiple variables in her head simultaneously, the satisfaction of applying specific knowledge to a specific problem and seeing an actual result. It was the kind of work that made her feel useful in a way that was not theoretical. She was walking between appointments, crossing the short stretch of open ground between the station's 2 buildings, when she saw him. Callum. He was standing near the edge of the path, not blocking it, not positioned in a way that demanded anything. He was wearing the same heavy coat as the night before. He looked like he had not slept. She stopped. They looked at each other across 15 feet of open ground. The morning was gray and cold, and there was no fire between them and no crowd around them, and no bond snapping dramatically into place. Just 2 people in ordinary daylight looking at each other. He said, "I need 5 minutes." She looked at him. She thought about Declan saying, "I would have told you," and she thought about the night at the river, and she thought about the specific shape of what had been done to her, and what she was and was not required to do with that. 5 minutes, she said. She did not move toward him. He came to where she was standing. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "Yes," she said. "You do." He told her. Not everything. She could tell he was being selective, editing toward the parts he felt she needed, and away from the parts that were operationally sensitive. But the core of it was there. The threat, the faction, the calculation he had made. Walter Graves. The way someone had identified the bond before it happened, and communicated to him what would follow if he accepted it. She listened. She let him finish. Then she said, "You made a decision about my life without consulting me." "Yes," he said. He did not try to argue with the framing. "You decided that your assessment of the risk outweighed my right to know the situation and choose for myself." "Yes," he said. "And you believed," she said, "that removing me from the situation, without explanation, without the chance for me to say whether I was willing to carry the risk, was the most protective thing you could do." "Yes," he said. It was a thin word. He said it like a man who had made a decision he could defend but not entirely live with. "I understand the reasoning," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not hope, exactly. The early edge of something like it. "But I need you to understand," she continued, steadily, "that understanding the reason does not fix the thing. You made me into a problem you solved, not a person you consulted." He looked at her. "That is what you need to reckon with," she said. "Not whether your reason was good, whether the way you acted on it was." A silence, long and dense. "You're right," he said. She had not expected that. She had expected argument or justification, or the particular defensiveness of someone who had done a difficult thing for a good reason and wanted credit for the difficulty. She had not expected him to simply agree. "I know," she said. And then she said, "I'm not asking you to fix this. I don't know yet what I want from you, if anything. I need time to understand what the situation actually is." "Declan told you," he said. It was not an accusation, just recognition. "Declan told me when I asked him directly," she said. "There is a difference." Callum was quiet for a moment. Something crossed his face that was complicated and particular and not easy to name. She watched him look toward where the PAC's northern path disappeared into the trees, in the direction of Declan's house. "He's a better man than I've given him credit for," Callum said. She said nothing. That was a conversation for the 2 of them. "I'll go," he said. "All right," she said. He turned. "Callum," she said. He stopped. She thought about what to say. She thought about the frayed ache in her chest that had turned toward him this morning, the way it had turned toward him last night at the window, without her permission, without her direction. She thought about the fact that biology was not the same as decision, and that she was a person who made her own decisions. "The next time you need to make a choice that involves me," she said, "involve me in making it." He turned back. He looked at her with an expression she was certain she would remember for a long time, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real, not calculated, not managed. "Yes," he said, "I will." Then he walked away. She stood in the cold morning air between the 2 station buildings, and she breathed slowly, and she let the frayed ache settle back into its ordinary place, the stone she had swallowed place, the livable place. And she went back inside, and she finished her appointments, and she wrote her notes, and she closed the station at her usual time. She walked home through the pine trees in the late afternoon dark. She thought about what Declan had said, that he would have told her. that he trusted her to carry the information. She thought about what that trust felt like, coming from a person she had only known for 3 weeks, handed to her without condition. She thought about what it meant that she had already started planning her day around the moments when he might appear. She stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the path in the dark with her breath clouding in the cold air, and she was honest with herself, the way she was always honest with herself eventually, because she had found over the years that the longer she avoided the honesty, the more it cost her when it arrived. Something was building between herself and Declan Voss. It was not the bond. It had none of the bond's instantaneous certainty, none of its biological thunder. It was quieter than that and slower than that and built from entirely different materials, from coffee on cold steps and directness, and the particular way he looked at her when she said something that surprised him, and the paperwork he had filled out before she agreed, and the river in the dark. She stood in the middle of the path and let herself know this. Then she walked home. The threat arrived on a Wednesday. Not in a dramatic way. Not with fire or confrontation or any of the obvious signals that might have given everyone time to prepare. It arrived the way most real threats arrived, quietly, through a channel no one was watching carefully enough, dressed as ordinary business. A man came to the PAC's eastern border gate, claiming to be from a trading cooperative 3 territories north. He had a cart, legitimate-looking documentation, a polite manner, and eyes that moved too efficiently around the compound. The border guard on duty, a young wolf named Felix, 2 years into his patrol rotation and still learning to trust his instincts over his eyes, processed the paperwork and sent the man on his way with a standard visitor log entry. Felix mentioned it to his patrol partner an hour later. His patrol partner mentioned it to the shift captain. The shift captain cross-referenced the cooperative name against the territory network records. It did not exist. Mira heard about it at noon, when Declan came to the medical station. He was not running. He never ran. She had noticed this, the way he moved through urgency with the same steady pace he moved through everything, as though panic was a luxury he had decided not to afford. But there was something in the set of his shoulders that was different from the ordinary way he carried himself, something compressed and tight, and she recognized it before he said a word. "There's a situation," he said. She put down the compound she was grinding. "Tell me." He did. Quickly, accurately, in the way he gave information. No decoration, no drama, all the relevant pieces in order. The false cooperative. The visitor log entry. The fact that the man had not come anywhere near the station or the residential area, had moved straight through the compound toward the territory center and then apparently back out again, too quickly, as though he had been mapping rather than trading. What was he looking for? She asked. Declan looked at her. Informational layout, who is where, when, what the response pattern is when something happens at the east gate. A pause. This is Westmere. She was quiet for a moment. She thought about Walter Graves and the long conversation she had with Declan on the cold steps 3 weeks ago, and the way he had laid it out for her. The faction, the method, the vulnerability they had identified. They came back, she said. They never fully left, he said. This is an escalation. What does it mean for the PAC? Increased patrols, faster response protocols. Callum is convening the senior leadership today. He looked at her steadily. And it means the situation regarding you has changed. The designation, she said. The designation makes you formally attached to a ranked member, he said. That offers some structural protection, but it also means you are visibly part of the PAC hierarchy now in a way you were not before. They'll know that you're under my protection. Which makes me a different kind of target, she said. Potentially, he said. Or it removes you from the specific vulnerability they were originally trying to exploit, a leverage point against Callum, and makes you less interesting to them. You don't know which. Not yet, he said. No. She considered this. She turned the information over in her mind with the same precision she brought to a complicated medical case. All the variables, all the possible outcomes, the intersections between them. What do you need from me? She asked. He looked at her with that particular quality of attention that she had come to recognize. The look that meant she had said something he had not expected and was adjusting to. I need you to be aware of your surroundings, he said. I need you to tell me if anything feels wrong. A person who doesn't belong, an encounter that feels off, anything that doesn't fit the ordinary pattern of your day. Your instincts are probably better than you give them credit for. And I should not be alone on the outer trails, she said. Not until we know more, he said. She nodded. This was practical. She was a practical person, and she received it as such, without the particular resentment she might have felt if it had come from someone else, someone whose motive she trusted less. She was aware that she trusted his motive. She was aware that the awareness of that trust had stopped surprising her, which told her something. "I'll tell Lena," she said. "She'll want to know." "Good," he said. "Lena is sensible." He paused. "Owen too. Owen already runs the Eastern Patrol," she said. "He knows the outer trails better than anyone." "I'll talk to him," Declan said. He left. She went back to her grinding. The rhythmic motion of it was familiar and grounding, the kind of physical task that let the top of her mind stay engaged while the rest of her sorted through what she had just heard. She thought about Westmere. She thought about the mapped vulnerability, an alpha without a bonded mate, and the way that particular pressure point had been neutralized by Callum's rejection and then replaced by a different structure, a different set of relationships that the faction had apparently come back to study. She thought about the fact that this had started in some sense with her, not because of anything she had done, not because of any choice she had made, simply because the bond had happened, and because someone had seen it as an instrument before she had even understood it as a reality. She thought about Callum standing across the clearing in firelight. She thought about what it would have been like to be told, to have been given the full picture and the real choice. She thought about whether she would have chosen differently if she had known. She was not certain. That uncertainty was new. It had not been there a week ago, when her sense of the wrong was cleaner and simpler. Now it was more complicated. Understanding the fear behind his decision had not softened her toward the decision itself, but it had made the person who made it more three-dimensional, and three-dimensional people were harder to be cleanly angry with. She told Lena everything at the end of the day. Lena took it in with the focused attention she brought to all information she considered important, leaning slightly forward, very still, tracking every detail. When Mira finished, Lena sat back. "They came onto the territory," she said. "Yes," Mira said. "To map the layout. That's what Declan thinks." "Declan is usually right about this kind of thing," Lena said. She said it flatly, as an observed fact. Mira looked at her. "I've been paying attention," Lena said, unapologetically, "to how he operates, to the things he gets right." "And?" Mira said. "He's been right every time I've been able to check," Lena said. "That's a meaningful pattern." A pause. "He came to warn you before the general pack announcement." "Yes," Mira said. "That's also meaningful," Lena said. Mira said nothing. "Mira," Lena said. "I know," Mira said. "Do you know, or do you know and are choosing not to look at it?" Mira picked up her bag. She considered how to answer this, how to be honest with Lena, who deserved honesty, without saying something she was not yet ready to say out loud, because saying it out loud would make it real, in a way she was not yet entirely prepared for. "Both," she said finally. Lena nodded. "Fair enough," she said. "Both is progress." Mira walked home alone, on the main path, not the outer trails. The evening was cold and clear, the first genuinely clear night in several days, and the stars were very bright overhead. She looked at them while she walked, the way she sometimes did when she needed to think, and the physical act of looking at something enormous helped her do it. She thought about Declan. She had been thinking about Declan for 3 weeks with increasing frequency and increasing honesty, and she had been managing the thinking by filing it under the category of ordinary attention to a new and significant person in her life. The kind of attention that was appropriate and proportionate and did not require further examination. She had been running out of room to file it that way. It was not the bond. She was certain of that. She was certain because she knew what the bond felt like. She had felt it, detonating in her chest at the Blood Moon Assembly. Enormous and instantaneous and entirely independent of anything she knew or chose. She knew its texture. What she felt when she thought about Declan did not have that texture. What it had was something she had less experience with and trusted more. She turned this over for the rest of the walk home. She was almost at her door when her instincts registered something wrong. It was nothing she could have articulated in the moment, not a sound, not a movement, not anything specific enough to name. A quality in the air, a particular quality of stillness that was not quite right, the way a room feels different when someone has been in it and left just before you arrived. She stopped walking. She looked at her house. The windows were dark. She had not left any lights on. She rarely did. The front path was ordinary. The garden at the side was ordinary. Nothing moved. She looked at the tree line. Nothing moved there either. She stood for another 10 seconds, listening with the full attention she had learned to give to her instincts over 22 years of living at the edge of a wolf pack's territory, where the difference between what you noticed and what you ignored could occasionally matter quite a lot. Nothing. She went inside. She turned on the kitchen light. She stood in the center of her kitchen, and she turned slowly, looking at every corner, every surface. Nothing out of place. Everything exactly where she had left it. She let out a slow breath. She told herself it was the heightened awareness from Declan's warning, the body responding to new information with new vigilance, which was appropriate and healthy, and not the same as something actually being wrong. She told herself that. She believed it mostly. She checked the windows anyway. She checked the back door. She checked the latch on the small garden gate. Everything was where it should be, locked where it should be locked. She made dinner. She was at the stove when her phone rang. Declan. "Are you home?" he said. "Yes," she said. "What's happened?" "The man from the border this morning," he said. "We have more information. He didn't leave the territory the way the log suggests. He was inside the perimeter for most of the afternoon." Her grip on the phone tightened slightly. "How long?" "Close to 4 hours," he said. "He moved through 3 of the eastern residential sectors." A pause. She heard him decide something. "Yours was one of them." She stood very still. "I'm fine," she said. "Everything is locked, I checked." "Good," he said. "Stay inside tonight. I'm going to have someone walk the outer perimeter of your block." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he said. She was quiet. "Mira," he said. "This is not overreach. This is what the designation means. Let me do what I said I would do." She breathed. She thought about the quality of the evening air when she had stopped on the path, the wrongness that had no name. She thought about the fact that she had checked her windows, which meant her instincts had registered something even if they could not identify it. "All right," she said. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said. She put the phone down. She finished making dinner. Her hands were steady. She noted that they were steady and considered that steadiness, the fact that she was afraid and was not shaking, which did not mean the fear was not real, only that she had good practice at carrying real fear without letting it move through her hands. She thought about the fact that Declan was coming. She thought about how that felt. Like relief. Like the specific relief of knowing that the person who was coming was someone she trusted, not because the situation required trust but because she had built it deliberately, examined it, chosen it. 14 minutes later he knocked on her door. She opened it. He looked at her. The way she was beginning to understand, he looked at her, with the full weight of his attention, not skimming, not performing comfort, just present. "Are you all right?" he said. "Yes," she said, and then, because it was true, "mostly." He nodded. He looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly necessary for the question to be answered. She looked back. "Come inside," she said. "I made too much dinner." He came inside. They ate at her kitchen table, the same table where he had sat 3 weeks ago in the early morning gray, with his hands folded and the paperwork already signed in his pocket. She noticed that the kitchen felt less large with another person in it. She noticed that this was not an uncomfortable thing. Outside, the cold night moved through the trees. Somewhere on the outer perimeter, a wolf she did not know was walking the block. And inside her kitchen, something ordinary and also quite large was happening without ceremony, without announcement, in the way the most significant things usually did, quietly, between two people who were not quite ready to name it and were doing it anyway. She asked him about the pack's response plan over dinner. He told her, clearly, without the edited version he might have given someone he was less sure of. The perimeter patrols had been doubled on the eastern sectors. Callum had called in 2 senior wolves from the pack's northern division, wolves with experience in inter-faction disputes, and the particular kind of border intelligence work that the situation was now requiring. Contact had been made with the Ridgeback Pack to the west, the territory that bordered Westmere's range, to share information and coordinate response. "Ridgeback's Alpha is someone Callum trusts?" she asked. "Helen Marsh," Declan said. "She's been in her position for 12 years. Smart, methodical, not given to dramatic action. Yes, Callum trusts her judgment." "Good," Mira said. "Westmere is working against multiple packs, not just Thornfield?" "Almost certainly," he said. "The corridor between territories, the gap they operate in, gives them access to the outer edges of several packs. They're not looking to confront any single pack head-on. They're looking to destabilize from the sides. Political pressure, not combat," she said. "Correct," he said. "Which makes them harder to address than a straightforward territorial dispute. You can't simply defend a line against something that doesn't move in lines." She thought about that. The man who came today, mapping the eastern sectors, what does that tell you about their method? Declan was quiet for a moment, the way he was quiet when he was thinking rather than waiting. "It tells me they're still in the information gathering phase. They don't yet know enough about Thornfield's internal layout to act on whatever plan they're developing. The mapping means preparation, not imminent action." How long does preparation usually take? She asked. For a faction with this level of organization? Months, he said. We have time to respond properly, if we use it well. She nodded. She cleared the plates. He rose to help without being asked, which was a small thing and not a small thing simultaneously. And she noted it the way she was noting many things about him these days, precisely, without making it into more than it was, but also without making it into less. They washed up at her kitchen sink, standing side by side, and the ordinary domesticity of it was strange in a way she did not have a word for. Strange because it was comfortable, because it felt like a thing she had done before, though she had not. I want to tell you something, she said. She was rinsing a bowl and she kept her eyes on the water. All right, he said. When I walked home tonight, she said, before I went inside, I stopped. Something felt wrong. I couldn't name it. But I checked the windows and the locks before you called. I know, he said, that matters. I'm telling you because it means I'm going to take this seriously, she said. Not because I need to be managed through it, but because I'm paying attention, and I will tell you what I notice. She turned off the water and looked at him. That's what I need, he said. His voice had a particular quality that was not quite soft, but was close to it. That's exactly what I need. They stood in her kitchen in the quiet of the evening, and she thought about trust, about the specific thing it was, how it was not given but built, how it required material and time, and the particular kind of repeated choosing that most people mistook for something automatic. You should go, she said. It's late. Yes, he said. He moved toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. I'm going to walk the perimeter before I leave. I know, she said. Lock up behind me, he said. I already planned to, she said. He went out into the cold. She locked the door. She listened to the sound of his footsteps on the path, the creak of the third board, the receding quiet as he moved around the side of the house. She stood at the door with her hand still on the latch, and she breathed slowly, and she thought about the fact that she was glad he was here, and glad he was going, and glad she would see him again, and all three things were true simultaneously, and none of them canceled the others out. She went to bed. She slept better than she had expected to. In the morning there was a note under her door, handwritten, brief. The block perimeter was clear. 2 other patrol wolves had checked the surrounding trail in the night without incident. She was not to worry, but she was to text him when she arrived at the station and when she left. She read it twice. She put it on the kitchen table. She made coffee. She texted him when she arrived at the station. She texted him when she left. She was aware, doing this, that she did not mind doing it, that it did not feel like an imposition or a constraint, but rather like a thread between 2 points, a simple ongoing confirmation of presence, and that the confirmation of his presence had become, quietly and without ceremony, something she had started to rely on. She was thinking about this when Lena looked at her across the station, with that particular expression of someone who has already understood something, and is waiting for the other person to catch up. What? Mira said. Nothing, Lena said. Lena. I said nothing, Lena said. I'm saying absolutely nothing. I'm a silent person. You are the least silent person I know, Mira said. I am being quiet out of respect, Lena said, with tremendous dignity, for the fact that you are figuring something out, and I trust you to do it without my commentary. Since when? Mira said. Since right now, Lena said. Starting now. This is my new approach. Mira looked at her. Lena looked back, the picture of studied neutrality. Thank you, Mira said. You're welcome, Lena said. They worked through the morning, and Mira thought about what she was figuring out, and she let herself figure it out slowly, in the time she needed, without pushing toward a conclusion that would arrive in its own time whether she pushed or not. The summons came on a Friday, not from Callum, from the pack elders, a formal written request for Mira to attend a meeting in the old hall at the center of the territory at 9 in the morning, with no stated agenda beyond her presence being required. The wording was polite, and the politeness of it was its own information, the particular formality that elders used when a matter was serious and they wished to communicate the seriousness without triggering alarm. She showed it to Declan when he came by the station that morning. He read it. He handed it back. His jaw was set. Did you know about this? She asked. No, he said, and then, but I can make a reasonable guess. The designation, she said. Among other things, he said. There are 2 elders on the council who have had concerns about the arrangement since it was formalized. Nothing formal, not an official challenge, but questions. About whether it was appropriate, she said. About whether it was motivated, he said carefully. whether the protection was genuine or whether it served other purposes. She looked at him. And does it serve other purposes? He met her eyes. He did not look away. I offered it because it was the right thing to do, and because you needed it, he said. Those were the only reasons. She believed him. She had been believing him, she realized, for some time now. Not as a leap of faith, but as a conclusion she had arrived at through accumulated evidence, the way conclusions were supposed to be reached. I'll go to the meeting, she said. I'll go with you, he said. The request was for me, she said. The request was for you, he said, and I am the second beta who submitted the formal designation, which means I have standing to be present. A pause. Let me be present. She looked at him for a moment. She thought about what he had just said, not asked her permission, offered his presence, and then asked for the opportunity to provide it. There was a distinction in that which she recognized and valued. All right, she said. They went together at 9. The old hall was exactly what it sounded like. The oldest standing structure in the Thornfield territory, timber-framed, low-ceilinged, smelling of decades of pack meetings and wood smoke. The elders used it for significant business, the kind that required the weight of the building's history as a kind of backdrop. There were 4 elders waiting when Mira and Declan arrived. Elder Crane, the eldest, 81, sharp-eyed, someone Mira respected for the precision of his thinking even when she disagreed with his conclusions. Elder Whitmore, a woman of 60 who had overseen pack law for 30 years, and whose memory for precedent was legendary. The other 2 she knew less well, Elder Farrow and Elder June, both of whom sat quietly and observantly. Callum was also there. She had not expected that. She kept her face neutral when she saw him, standing off to the side, not at the table, in the posture of a man who was present but had not been invited to lead this particular meeting. He met her eyes when she came in. Something moved in his expression briefly. Then he looked away. Elder Crane opened the meeting without preamble. He was not a man for preamble. The designation filed by 2nd Beta Declan Voss for Omega Mira Langston was received and recorded in accordance with pack law, he said. The Council has no challenge to the filing itself. The question before us today concerns the broader situation, specifically, the ongoing threat from the Westmere faction and the role the young woman's status has played in it. Mira sat very still. Beside her, Declan was equally still. We want to understand, Elder Whitmore said, directing her words at Mira, the chain of events as you experienced them, the bond, the rejection, the designation, and what you have been told about the reasoning. Mira looked at her. You want to know if Callum's decision was appropriate, she said. We want to understand it, Whitmore said. From your perspective. Mira considered for a moment. She thought about what she wanted to say and what she wanted to be true, and whether those 2 things aligned. She found that they did. He made a decision about my life without telling me why, she said. That was wrong. I've told him it was wrong. He agreed with me. She paused. The reason behind the decision was fear. For my safety, specifically, in the context of a threat he had received regarding the bond. I understand the fear. I do not think fear justified the silence. Silence in the room. But, she continued, I also do not think that Callum's decision, or the way he made it, constitutes a failure of his leadership. It constitutes a failure of his judgment in a specific moment. People in leadership are allowed to fail in specific moments and be accountable for those failures without losing the right to continue leading. Elder Crane looked at her with something in his expression that she thought might be respect. It came and went quickly. What is your current relationship with the Alpha? He asked. There is no relationship, she said. There is an understanding. He apologized. I heard him. I'm not interested in revenge or in holding the Pack's leadership in a state of disruption over what happened between us. She looked at Crane directly. I'm interested in living my life in my territory, in my house, doing my work at the medical station. And the designation with the 2nd Beta? Whitmore asked. Mira did not look at Declan. She felt him beside her, still and attentive, and she was aware of the full weight of the question and what it was actually asking. It was offered in good faith and I accepted it in good faith, she said, and it has become more than a legal structure. A silence. More than a legal structure, Crane repeated. Yes, she said. She said it plainly, without apology, with the particular precision of someone who has decided to tell the truth all the way. Elder Farrow, who had been quiet, leaned forward slightly. And the 2nd Beta is aware of this? He is in this room, Mira said. You are welcome to ask him. All 4 elders looked at Declan. He looked back at them without flinching. I am aware of it, he said. And I want to be clear that what has developed between Mira and myself did not originate from a decision to use the designation as an opportunity. It developed because proximity and honesty are conditions under which things develop. Silence. That is either very appropriate or very complicated, Elder June said. It was the first time she had spoken, and she said it dryly, without apparent judgment. It's both, Declan said. The elders exchanged a look that Mira could not fully read, the look of 4 people who had been doing this for decades and had developed a shorthand that required no words. Elder Crane looked at Callum. Alpha, your position. Callum had been silent throughout the entire meeting. He stood now with his hands at his sides and his face controlled and his eyes on a point somewhere between the floor and the table. Then he looked up. My position, he said, is that I made an error in judgment, and that the people most affected by that error have handled it with more integrity than I showed in making it. He paused. I have no objection to the designation or to whatever develops from it. None. Mira looked at him. He was not looking at her. He was looking at Declan. Something moved between the brothers in that moment. Not an argument, not a reconciliation. Something more complicated than either. The specific exchange of 2 people who have a long history and a recent wound and are in the early stages of figuring out what the history means now that the wound has been acknowledged. Elder Whitmore looked at Mira. The council's concern, in summary, is that the situation not be allowed to create instability in the PAC's leadership. That has been our primary interest in this meeting. I understand, Mira said. Do you have any concerns about that? Whitmore asked. No, Mira said. Callum Voss is a good alpha. His error was personal and private, and I have no interest in making it into something it was not. The PAC deserves stable leadership, and it has it. Crane looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at his fellow elders, another unspoken exchange. Very well, he said. This matter is closed before the council. He picked up his pen, made a notation in the record book, and set it down. Thank you all for coming. That was it. Mira stood. Declan stood beside her. She did not look at Callum as they moved toward the door, not because she was avoiding him, but because there was nothing else she needed from that direction right now, and the directness of her own attention had to go somewhere more useful. Declan held the door open for her. She walked out into the cold morning air. Behind her, she heard the low murmur of continued conversation in the hall. The elders, probably, doing the administrative work of closing a matter. She did not go back to listen. She stood on the old hall's stone step with the winter sky above her, and she breathed. Declan came out behind her. He stood beside her, not talking, just there. After a moment, she said, That went better than I expected. You were very good in there, he said. I said what was true, she said. That's what I mean, he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the sky, which was pale and enormous, and completely indifferent to anything that had just happened inside the old hall. She looked at the same sky. I said it in front of 4 elders, and the alpha of this pack, she said, that what started as a legal structure has become something else. You did, he said. I want you to know, she said carefully, that I meant it. He turned his head and looked at her. I know, he said. I'm saying it out loud, she said, because I'm done managing what I know by keeping it quiet. He looked at her for a long moment. The near miss of a smile arrived, and this time it completed itself. A full, quiet, genuine thing that she had not seen before, and that was different from all the partial versions she had been collecting. Good, he said. She looked back at the sky. She was aware of the frayed ache in her chest, the remnant of the rejected bond, the stone she had swallowed. Still there, smaller now than it had been. Not healed, but proportionate. The right size for something that had happened and mattered and was part of her history without being the whole of it. She was aware of something else, alongside the ache, occupying the same space, not instead of it, alongside it. Something that had been built out of early mornings and cold steps and honest conversations and the particular steadiness of a man who showed up and told the truth even when the truth was complicated, and stayed even when leaving would have been easier. Come on, Declan said. I'll walk you back to the station. You don't have to, she said. The direct path is fine during the day. I know, he said. I want to. She looked at him. All right, she said. They walked through the territory together in the pale winter morning, past the older houses and the younger ones, through the stands of pine that the November wind moved through with a sound like breathing. They did not hold hands. They did not say much. But the distance between them was different from the distance it had been 3 weeks ago. Smaller, warmer, inhabited. When they reached the medical station, she stopped at the door. Thank you, she said, for being there today. There was never any version of today where I wasn't going to be, he said. She looked at him for a moment. I know, she said. She went inside. She could see him through the window, standing on the path for a moment, before he turned and walked back toward the northern part of the territory. She watched him go with her hand flat on the windowsill and the pale morning light around her. Lena appeared at her elbow. "You're smiling," Lena said. "I'm working," Mira said. "You're doing both," Lena said. "Very impressively, simultaneously." "Lena," Mira said. "Still being quiet," Lena said. Respectful silence, ongoing. Mira looked at her. Lena looked back with tremendous, unconvincing innocence. Mira went to work. The morning appointments ran long. A patrol wolf with a badly sprained wrist that she had to tape carefully, explaining twice why the particular angle of the wrapping mattered, and why she needed him to come back in 3 days so she could check the swelling. 2 children from the PAC's residential East Block, a brother and sister, 7 and 9, who had picked up the same respiratory infection that was moving through the younger age group that week, both needing the same herbal compound in slightly different concentrations. An older woman named Clara who came by every 2 weeks not because she needed medical care, Mira suspected, but because she was lonely in the particular way that people who live alone in cold months get lonely, and the station gave her somewhere to go that felt purposeful. Mira gave Clara extra time. She always did. After the last appointment, Lena sat on the edge of the supply desk and said, "Do you want to hear what I've been not saying for 3 weeks?" "Not particularly," Mira said. "I'm going to say it anyway," Lena said. "Because that is what I'm actually like, and we both know it, and pretending otherwise has been an interesting experiment, but I've reached my limit." Mira put her pen down. "He watches for your name," Lena said. Not in a dramatic way. In the way that people do when they care about something and they're being careful not to make it obvious they care. I've seen it 3 times in PAC functions. Someone mentions the Eastern Station, or a patrol situation near your part of the territory, and something changes in his face. Very small, but I notice things. Mira was quiet. "And you," Lena said, "have been walking taller for 2 weeks. Not because of what Callum did or didn't do. Because of the other one. You walk differently when you've eaten a good meal, and slept well, and someone has treated you decently, and that's what you look like." "Lena," Mira said. "I'm done," Lena said. "That was it. No more commentary." "That was substantial commentary," Mira said. "I compress well," Lena said. Mira picked up her pen. She looked at the notes she was writing, patient records, treatment plans, the ordinary documentation of ordinary care, and she thought about what Lena had said, about watching for her name, about the small change in a face. She thought about the fact that she already knew this, had known it for some time, had been allowing herself to know it slowly, at a pace that felt manageable, at a pace that kept the knowledge from becoming demand. She thought about what it meant to let something be real. "I want to be careful," she said. "I know," Lena said. "The bond with Callum, the rejected one, it changed what I think I know about my own instincts," Mira said. "I felt something that enormous, and it turned out to be simultaneously real and not mine to keep. I'm still learning what to do with that." "Yes," Lena said, and then, gently, "But Mira, the fact that one thing was involuntary and painful doesn't mean everything that follows it has to be treated with suspicion." Mira looked at her. "What you feel about Declan Voss," Lena said. "You chose. You didn't feel it first and decide later. You built it, deliberately, one interaction at a time, and you've been checking it against your own judgment as you went. That's the opposite of what happened at the Blood Moon." Mira sat with that for a moment. "You've been thinking about this for a while," she said. 3 weeks, Lena said. "I have had excellent material to think about." Mira closed her record book. She put her hands flat on the desk. She thought about chosen things, the deliberate kind, the checked against your own judgment kind, and she thought about what it meant to trust the work she had done, the quiet and careful accumulation of a person she actually knew. "I'm going to tell him," she said. Lena looked at her. "Tell him what, specifically?" "That this matters to me," Mira said. "Not the designation, not the legal structure. Him." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Good." "I'm terrified," Mira said. "Of course you are," Lena said. "That's what this feels like when it's real." Mira nodded. She stood. She put on her coat. She looked at Lena one more time, her friend, her reliable and honest friend who had been sitting with this information for 3 weeks out of respect, and could not quite hold it in any longer, which was so entirely and accurately Lena, that Mira felt the particular warmth of it. "Thank you," Mira said. "Go," Lena said. "I'll close up." Mira went. She walked the path between the medical station and the northern part of the territory, a longer walk than the one to her house, uphill through the older trees, past the part of the territory where the Pack's founding families had built their original structures, and where the oldest memory of Thornfield lived in the wood and stone. She walked quickly, not because she was afraid of changing her mind, because she had made a decision, and she was the kind of person who moved toward decisions once they were made. She knocked on Declan's door. He opened it. He looked at her face. He read it in the way she was learning he read things, quickly, accurately, without making a show of the accuracy. "Come in," he said. She came in. She stood in his entrance. The first time she had been inside his house was the morning he offered the designation, and she had stood in the same spot and looked at the stacked books and the quiet room and thought, "This is a person who lives carefully." She thought the same thing now and added to it everything she had learned since. "I need to say something," she said. "All right," he said. "What I said in the hall this morning, that the designation has become more than a legal structure." "Yes," he said. He was very still. "I said it in front of the elders because it was true," she said. "And I want to say it to you, just to you, not as information for a council, because I don't want it to exist only in official contexts." He looked at her, the full weight of his attention, which she knew by now was a significant thing. "What is it?" he said, "specifically, to you?" She thought about the answer. She thought about Lena saying you chose it, deliberately, one interaction at a time. She thought about coffee on cold steps and a bruise on a jaw, and because someone should have, and the paperwork already signed. "It's you," she said. "I mean you, not the role, not the arrangement, not the circumstances. You, specifically." He breathed. She held his gaze. "I'm not the same as what happened to you at the Blood Moon," he said. His voice was careful, precise. "I need you to know that what I feel isn't—" "I know," she said. "I know it isn't. Because I need it to be clear," he said, "that this isn't replacement or proximity or gratitude or any of the other things that it could be confused for." "Declan," she said. He stopped. "I know what this is," she said. "I've been paying attention to it for 3 weeks. I know the difference between what your brother and I had and what this is." She paused. "One was assigned. This I built. And I trust the things I build." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "So do I." The distance between them, which had been the kind of careful distance maintained by two people being deliberate with each other, changed, not dramatically, not with urgency, simply a step forward on his part, a slight movement of her chin upward, the natural geometry of two people who have stopped maintaining a particular gap. He put his hand against her cheek, one hand, careful, with the same precision he brought to everything. She leaned into it slightly, just slightly, the small motion of something that had been held still for a long time choosing, finally, to move. "Okay," she said, quietly. "Okay," he said. Outside, the winter light moved through the tall pines of the Northern Territory, cold and clear, falling across the old wood of the house and the old paths between the old trees and the whole complicated, continuing life of a pack that had its wounds and its politics, and its difficult choices and its ordinary people, who were brave constantly without calling it that. Inside, two people who had chosen each other carefully and deliberately, stood in a quiet room, and did not need to say anything more. For now. The week after the Elders' Hall meeting, Thornfield received a formal delegation from Westmere. It arrived on a Tuesday morning with a white marker flag, the interpack signal for a requested diplomatic meeting rather than hostile entry, and 2 representatives, neither of whom was Walter Graves, which Mira thought was significant even before she understood why. She was at the medical station when Declan sent her the brief text message. Delegation at Eastgate. Staying informed. Keep routine. She kept her routine. She saw the first of them by accident in the afternoon. She was coming back from a supply run at the pack storage facility on the eastern edge of the residential area when she turned a corner and walked nearly into a woman she had not seen before. The woman was tall, composed, dressed practically for cold weather, and had the particular quality of stillness that Mira had come to associate with people who were very aware of their surroundings at all times. She was looking at the medical station with an expression that was too systematic for simple curiosity. Mira stopped. The woman looked at her. "You're Mira Langston," she said. It was not a question. Mira noted that it was not a question. She noted the way the woman said it, with the mild surprise of someone confirming information against expectation, which meant she had expected someone different and was recalibrating. "I am," Mira said. "I'm Claire Dutton," the woman said. "I'm here with the Westmere delegation." Mira looked at her steadily. Then you're in a residential area without a pack escort, which is not what your white flag agreement allows. A brief pause. Claire Dutton looked at her with something that might have been a recalibration, or might have been a kind of involuntary respect. You're right, she said. I got turned around. The diplomatic meeting area is the community hall, Mira said. North Path, second fork, follow the markers. Thank you, the woman said. She walked away in the direction Mira had indicated, calmly, without hurry. Mira watched her go for a moment, then she went inside the station and texted Declan. One of the delegation was in the residential area unescorted. East Block, said she got turned around, directed her north. He should know. His reply came in under a minute. Already handled. Thank you for the detail. And then, a few seconds later, you did the right thing not engaging further. She put her phone away. She told Lena. Lena listened. Then she said, very carefully, she was looking at the station. Yes, Mira said. Not at the residential area in general. Specifically at the station, Mira said. She was mapping it, just the way the man from last week mapped the eastern sectors, but more subtle. Lena was quiet. We're being assessed, Mira said, not the pack in general. This building. She sat with that for the rest of the afternoon, turning it over, considering what it meant that the medical station had become a point of interest to people whose interest was not medical. She thought about the Elders Hall meeting, about the framing of her as a vulnerability, a leverage point, and the way the designation had changed that framing, but perhaps not eliminated the interest. She was not afraid. She found that she was not, which she checked carefully and confirmed. She was alert, which was different. Alert was a tool. Fear was a distraction from the tool. Declan came by at closing time. He came in through the station's side door, the one she used, and he stood in the entrance for a moment looking at the room, with the practiced eye of someone assessing it for the first time with fresh information. The station, he said. I think so, she said. Walk me through why, he said. She did. She walked him through Claire Dutton's position when she found her, the angle of observation, the direction she had been facing, the systematic quality of the attention. She walked him through what she had told him about the man from the previous week's incursion, and the way the patterns matched even though the method had been different. He listened. He asked 2 specific questions. She answered them precisely. You're going to recommend I stop being here after dark, she said, before he could say it. Only until the delegation leaves, he said. After 6. Close early if you need to. Anyone who needs evening care can go to the main pack physician. The elder with the joint condition, she said. I see her on Thursday evenings. She doesn't do well with new providers. It takes time to build her trust. Declan looked at her. Tell me her name. Clara Wells, Mira said. I'll personally walk her to the main physician and introduce her, he said. I'll explain that it's temporary and that you will be back. She'll hear it from someone with rank. Mira looked at him. She thought about Clara Wells, who came to the station because she was lonely and needed somewhere to go, and who would be confused and a little frightened by a change in her routine, and who would be significantly less frightened if someone important told her calmly that everything was fine and would resume soon. She'll like you, Mira said. Something warm moved briefly in his expression and was gone. What else? He said. The supply request I was going to put in for next week, she said. We're low on 3 compounds. If I can't be here late, I need to submit the request early so it can be processed during day hours. Done tonight, he said. What do you need? She gave him the list from memory. He wrote it on his phone. Anything else? He said. No, she said. Then, yes, I want to understand what the delegation is actually here for. He looked at her. He was deciding something. She could see the decision happening, the weighing. Formally, he said, they are requesting an extension of their corridor rights. The gap territory between Westmere and Thornfield's border allows them transit rights for trade. They're asking for an expansion of those rights. And informally, she said. Informally, he said, they are positioning. They're here to take the temperature of the pack, to see how Callum responds to pressure, to see whether the information they've been gathering on the eastern sectors gives them an advantage in the negotiation. And does it? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. They think it does, he said, because they don't know what we know they know. She understood what he meant. You can see the moves ahead because you know what they've mapped. Exactly, he said. Callum's going to use it. He's already using it, Declan said. There was a particular quality in his voice when he said his brother's name. Not warm, exactly, but more settled than it had been a few weeks ago. The quality of two people who had done the harder work of an unresolved thing and were finding, on the other side of it, that the ground was still there. He's a better strategist than people give him credit for. And what do you give him credit for? Mira asked. Declan looked at her. More than I showed in the weeks after the assembly, he said. Less than I owed him before that. She received this. She thought about what it took to say something like that. The particular discipline of honesty about the things you had gotten wrong. He came to see me, she said, at the station, before the delegation arrived. He didn't say much. He asked if I was all right with the current situation, the designation, Westmere, all of it. He asked as a question, not a formality. Declan was very still. What did you tell him? That I was managing well, she said, and that I didn't hold him responsible for the current threat, that the threat existed before the bond happened and would have found another form regardless. Declan was quiet for a moment. That was generous, he said. It was accurate, she said. I don't give generosity credit for what accuracy deserves. He looked at her, the near miss of a smile, full and brief. She turned off the station lights. They walked out into the cold evening together, and he walked her home on the main path the way he had started doing without making it a formal arrangement, and she led him without making it a negotiation. And the distance between them on the path was the kind of distance that was no longer about being careful, but about something that had simply found its natural measure. At her door he stopped. The delegation should be done by Friday, he said. And after Friday? She said. After Friday, he said, is a conversation I want to have with you. About what comes next. Not the designation, not the threat, not the politics. He met her eyes. About what we're doing. She looked at him in the cold night air, the bare trees above the path, the pale stars between the branches. Friday, she said. Friday, he said. He waited until she was inside and the door was locked. She could see his outline in the small window beside the doorframe, still there, unhurried. And then he went back down the path, the third board creaking under his weight the way it always did, a sound she had started to associate specifically with him. She put the kettle on. She thought about Friday. She thought about what came after complicated things, how the complicated things did not disappear, did not resolve into simplicity, but became part of the foundation of something built on top of them. How the rejected bond was still in her chest, the stone she had swallowed, settled and proportionate, and not pretending to be nothing. How it existed alongside the thing she had built with Declan without canceling either of them out. How being a person who had experienced one thing did not prevent you from experiencing another. How she had learned this, slowly, in the ordinary language of every day. She made her tea. She sat at her kitchen table, the same table, always the same table. And she opened the field guide that had been sitting on her windowsill since before any of this began, and she read about the winter properties of a root compound she had been wanting to try in Clara Wells's treatment, and the evening was quiet and warm, and entirely hers. She was ready for Friday. She was, she found, ready for a great many things. Thursday brought snow, the first real snow of the season, not a light dusting but a proper fall, thick and determined, that started in the early hours of the morning and was still coming down when Mira opened her kitchen curtains at 6. The territory would look different under it. The trails she knew by instinct would look unfamiliar. She made a mental note to check the station's heating, which had been temperamental since October, before the first patient arrived. She walked to work in the new snow with her coat buttoned to her chin, and her thoughts organized in the way she organized them when she was getting ready to be busy. Compartmentalized, sequential. The personal things set aside in a place she could return to later. The heating was fine. The morning was not busy. Snow kept people inside, mostly. She used the quieter hours to catch up on the documentation she had fallen behind on, and to prepare the compound she wanted to try for Clara Wells that evening. At noon she got a text from Declan. The delegation is wrapping early. Negotiation is resolving. Details later. She wrote back, good. And then, because it was true, and she had decided to stop managing what was true, looking forward to tomorrow. His reply took a moment, then, so am I. She put her phone down and felt a warmth in her chest. Clean and uncomplicated, something she had not expected to feel again so soon after the fraying, and was grateful to have been wrong about. Clara Wells arrived at 4:30 for her usual Thursday appointment. She was a small woman, 74 years old, with white hair and a deliberate way of moving that suggested someone who had once moved quickly and had made peace with moving slowly. She had been coming to the medical station for as long as Mira had been working there, and in 3 years they had developed the particular relationship that forms between a patient and a practitioner who has paid attention, A relationship based on specific knowledge, on the history of what had worked and what had not, on the trust that came from being accurately seen. "You look different," Clara said, settling into the examination chair and looking at Mira with the frank attention of the elderly, who have generally stopped performing the social convention of not noticing. "I'm well," Mira said. Clara said. The particular of someone who considers this an incomplete answer. Mira checked her joint mobility, adjusted the treatment compound concentration slightly upward based on Clara's recent reports, and asked about the quality of her sleep and her appetite. Clara answered precisely, as she always did. Clara was an excellent patient, observant, accurate, unafraid of her own symptoms. "There's going to be a temporary change to the Thursday schedule," Mira said, while she was preparing the week's compound. "Just next week. I'm going to arrange for you to see Dr. Harlow at the main clinic." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "It's a precautionary arrangement related to the current situation in the pack," Mira said. "It's temporary. I'll be back to our regular schedule the week after." "Is it safe?" Clara asked. "Yes," Mira said. "The station is fine. This is about my hours, not the station's safety." Another pause. "Is someone looking after you?" Clara asked. Mira looked at her. The question was direct and was asked with the particular precision of someone who had been alive long enough to have seen what happened when no one looked after someone who needed it. "Yes," Mira said. Clara settled back in her chair with the again, but different this time, satisfied. "Good," she said. "You work too hard and you think too carefully, and people like that need someone who shows up regardless." Mira looked at her. "I've had 3 people like that in my life," Clara said. "They're worth more than almost anything." She paused. "Is it the young Voss?" Mira opened her mouth. "I notice things," Clara said. "Old people are invisible, and invisible people notice things. He came by twice in the last 2 weeks. Once to check the path condition outside, once to speak to the supply officer. He always looks at the door when he's leaving." "He looks at the door," Mira said. "To see if you're coming out," Clara said. "It's a very specific kind of looking." Mira was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yes, it's the young Voss." Clara nodded. The satisfaction of someone who had suspected something, and been confirmed in the suspecting. "He has good hands," Clara said. "People with good hands are usually reliable. I've been watching them as a method for 40 years. Mira laughed. She could not help it. It came out small and genuine, and she had not laughed like that in some weeks. Clara looked pleased. "Next Thursday at Dr. Harlow's," Mira said, recovering. "And I'll be back the Thursday after." "He'll introduce me," he said. Clara said. "The young Voss. He left a message with my neighbor." "He will," Mira said. "Good," Clara said. "I'll behave." After Clara left, Mira locked the station and stood for a moment on the side step in the cold, looking at the snow-covered path and the snow-covered trees and the early dark that came at this time of year like something pulled down too soon. She thought about what Clara had said, the very specific kind of looking. She thought about the kinds of things that were true about a person before the person had named them out loud, the accumulated evidence, the specific looking, the third board that creaked and had become a sound she associated with someone specific. She texted Declan. She wrote, "Clara told me you have good hands." She watched the 3 dots appear. Then, "I have no idea what that means." She wrote back, "It means she approves. I'll explain tomorrow." He wrote, "Tomorrow." She walked home through the snow. It was a heavy fall now, soft and thick, landing in the pines and pulling the branches down gently. The territory was quiet in it, the way territories went quiet under the first real snow of the year. Not empty, just hushed, as though the snow required a certain respect. She walked through it with her face up for a moment, feeling the cold flakes on her skin, and she felt something she recognized as contentment, which was different from happiness and more reliable, which was the ordinary and sturdy thing she had always been best at building. She had built a good life here. She had built it carefully, with her own hands, from her own choices, through years of difficult things and ordinary things and the persistent refusal to leave the place that was hers. And now she was building it forward, into a version of it she had not clearly imagined until recently, not because she had been wrong about what she wanted, but because she had not yet met the specific person who made a specific part of the picture clear. She went home. She built a fire. She sat at the kitchen table with the field guide open and the fire warm behind her and the snow falling past the dark window, and she thought about Friday, and she felt the ordinary and extraordinary fact of looking forward to something. Friday came cold and clear. The snow from the previous 2 days had settled into something firm and navigable. The pack's maintenance crew had cleared the main paths before dawn, And by the time Mira walked to work, the territory had that particular quality it got after fresh snow. Everything sharpened and specific, the familiar shapes of trees and buildings made new by the white coat. The Westmere delegation had left the previous afternoon. She knew this from Declan's text, brief, factual. Done. Terms agreed. Details when I see you. And then a second message, a few minutes later, that said simply, still tonight? She had written back yes. She spent the day at the station doing the kind of work that required attention without being dramatic, the ongoing cases, the documentation, the compound preparation that needed to be done before the week's end. Lena was in high spirits, which meant she was also in a talking mood, and Mira let her talk because Lena's talking was the ambient sound of the station, and had been for 3 years, and she found she needed it today, the ordinary noise of a person she trusted filling up the room. At the midpoint of the afternoon, Lena said, without preamble, tonight, right? Why is this everyone's business? Mira said. Because the people who care about you have been watching you manage a very difficult few months, and we are emotionally invested, Lena said. Also, I'm your best friend, and I'm not included under anyone. Tonight, Mira confirmed. Lena made a small sound of satisfaction and returned to her work. Mira finished her last appointment at 4. She closed the station at 4:30. She walked home quickly, not because she was running, but because she was the kind of person who moved toward things she had decided on without dawdling in the deciding. She changed out of her work clothes. She built the fire in the kitchen because the evening was cold, and the kitchen fire made the room feel inhabited in the specific way she liked it. She put water on and stood at the kitchen window and looked at the snow in her garden and thought about nothing in particular, which was unusual for her but felt correct. He knocked at 6. She opened the door. He was wearing a dark wool coat and he had been out in the cold for long enough that his cheeks were slightly red. He looked at her face the way he always looked at her face, with the full weight of his attention, the assessment and the presence behind it simultaneously. "Come in," she said. He came in. The kitchen was warm. He took off his coat and put it over the chair back, and he stood in her kitchen the way he had stood in it before, with a kind of quiet naturalness, a person in a space that had become familiar without being entirely his. She poured tea. She brought both mugs to the table. They sat. "The delegation," she said. He told her. The terms Callum had negotiated were more advantageous than anyone had expected, a reduction in the corridor transit rights rather than an expansion, in exchange for Thornfield's agreement not to pursue formal interpack arbitration over the border incursion that the false trader had constituted. Westmere had wanted to avoid arbitration badly enough to accept the reduction. Why did they want to avoid arbitration? She asked. Because arbitration would have required them to disclose their full network of activities in the corridor territory, Declan said, which includes operations against at least 2 other packs that would not have been pleased to see the formal record. The information about the eastern sectors, Mira said. Callum used it as leverage. He disclosed that we knew about the mapping, Declan said. Without saying how we knew, the implication was enough. They understood that we had better intelligence on their movements than they had believed. And Claire Dutton? Mira asked, the woman from the residential area. She was genuinely a navigator, not a senior operative, Declan said. She maps for them. Callum made it clear in the negotiation that her presence in the residential area had been noted and was a matter of record. It shifted the tone of the whole meeting. Mira thought about this, about the woman looking at the medical station with the systematic eye, about her own decision to note it, to record it, to text Declan the detail immediately. The detail I gave you mattered, she said. It changed the balance, he said. Yes. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She thought about what it meant to be useful in a way she had not expected. She had understood, when Declan asked her to pay attention, that he was asking her to take care of herself, to be watchful for her own safety. She had not understood that the attention she paid would ripple outward into the pack's larger situation. "You're thinking about something," he said. "I'm thinking about what it means to be a low-ranked member of a pack, and to have something valuable to contribute to a leadership situation," she said, "and how rarely that connection is made." He looked at her. "You've been making that connection your whole life," he said, "at the station, with the people you treat." "That's different," she said. "It's the same discipline," he said. "Paying attention, noticing details, acting on them instead of dismissing them as outside your area." He held her gaze. "You're not as outside the structure as you think." She received this quietly. "Is that what you wanted to talk about tonight?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not specifically." "Then tell me what specifically," she said. He put down his mug. He looked at the table for a moment. Gathering himself, she thought, in the way of a person who has chosen honesty, and is finding the honest version of a complicated thing. I want to be clear about what I'm asking, he said, because the circumstances have been unusual enough that I want to make sure that neither of us is working with a version of this that the other one doesn't see. All right, she said. I know that the designation started as a legal structure, he said, and I know that I felt something before I offered it, not as an ulterior motive, but as a reason to be careful about what I was doing and why. I had been watching you for longer than 3 weeks. She looked at him. How long? 2 years, he said. Silence. 2 years, she said. You treated my patrol partner's broken arm in October 2 years ago, he said. I came with him to the station. You were exactly yourself, specific and calm, and you told Marcus what he needed to know, without softening it so much it became useless. I stood in the doorway for 20 minutes watching you work, and I drove home thinking about you. She did not say anything. She was absorbing this. The 2 years of it, the particular detail of his patrol partner, and October and the doorway. I'm telling you this, he said, because I want you to know that what I feel is not new. It is not a product of the situation. The situation gave me a reason to do something about it. That is not the same thing. She breathed. And the designation? She said. You offered it because of the feeling? I offered it because it was the right thing to do, he said. The feeling made me show up before dawn, to make sure the right thing got offered before you had to look for it yourself. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about 2 years. She thought about October and a patrol partner and a doorway. She thought about the way he had come to the river in the dark, and then to her door before the sun was up, with paperwork already filled in. I've been paying attention for 3 weeks, she said. I know, he said. You've been paying attention for 2 years. Yes, he said. That's a significant difference, she said. It is, he said. He did not try to equalize it or argue it away. She looked at the fire for a moment, the particular orange of it, the way it moved. She thought about what it meant to be the person who was watched and not the person watching, and whether that asymmetry mattered, or whether what mattered was what had been done with it. Did you ever, in those 2 years, she said carefully, did you ever consider telling me? Every time I saw you, he said. Why didn't you? Because it would have been inappropriate to say to a woman I barely knew that I found her compelling, he said, and because I was waiting for a circumstance that was not manufactured. You waited for a circumstance, she said. For 2 years, he said. She looked at him. He was very still. The fire in the kitchen behind her threw light and shadow across his face, and she looked at it the way she had been looking at his face for 3 weeks, noticing things, accumulating them, checking them against her own judgment. I believe you, she said. He breathed. That doesn't mean we don't still need to be careful, she said. The situation has been unusual enough that there are things I'll need time to sort out. The bond, the frayed thing from Callum. I don't know yet what that means in the long term. It's not what it was, but it's also not nothing. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to compete with it, she said. I'm telling you it exists. I know it exists, he said. I've known since the night of the assembly. I'm not afraid of it. Why not? She said. He looked at her. Because what I feel about you is bigger than what it has to compete with. She sat with that. She felt the frayed ache, present and real, and she felt the thing that lived alongside it. Built and chosen and 2 weeks old and somehow also 2 years old, from a doorway in October she had not known was happening. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She reached across the table and she put her hand over his. She did not say anything further, neither did he. The fire moved in the kitchen. The snow outside had gone still. The Pax territory lay quiet under its winter coat, the ordinary and continuing life of it, the patrols and the families and the old paths between the old trees. At her kitchen table, 2 people held each other's hands in the comfortable silence of people who have said enough, and outside, the cold and the dark were the ordinary kind, the kind that comes every winter and recedes every spring, the kind that has nothing to do with what happens inside, in the warm rooms, between the people who chose to be there. She made dinner. She had not planned to make dinner. She had not planned the evening with a menu in mind, but she found herself moving to the kitchen after the tea had gone cold and the silence had become warm enough to hold other things, and she opened the cabinet and looked at what was there and assembled it into something reasonable, and Declan got up from the table and helped without being asked, the way he had done the previous week, finding the knife drawer correctly on the first try, which meant he was paying attention to where things lived. They cooked in a kitchen that was not very large, which meant they were occasionally in each other's way, and managed it with the particular choreography of 2 people who were already learning the geography of each other, the small adjustments, the brief contacts. She burned the garlic slightly. He did not mention it. He simply leaned past her and adjusted the heat on the pan, and she watched him do it and said, "I know you didn't say anything." "I absolutely said nothing," he said. "You said nothing very loudly," she said. "That's a contradiction in terms," he said. "Declan." "The garlic is fine," he said. "It has character." She looked at him. He was looking at the pan with perfect innocence. She turned back to the stove and said, very quietly, 2 years. 2 years, he agreed. "Watching me burn garlic," she said. "Watching you work," he said. "You burn the garlic occasionally. It's one of approximately 3 things you do that are not excellent. What are the other 2? He considered. "You hold your pen wrong." "That's subjective," she said. "It's demonstrably incorrect grip mechanics," he said. "I've looked it up." She stared at him. "You've looked up pen grip mechanics." "I had a lot of time," he said, still looking at the pan. 2 years. She laughed. She laughed properly this time. The same way she had laughed with Clara, and for the same reason. The genuine and uncomplicated kind. The kind that arrived without warning and could not be manufactured. He looked at her when she laughed. She caught him looking. He did not pretend he had been looking at the garlic. They ate dinner at the kitchen table where they had eaten the previous week, and the week before that, and in 2 of those cases the eating had been functional rather than comfortable, but this time it was comfortable in a way she noticed and let herself notice. She asked him questions she had been saving up, not interrogations, but the natural accumulation of curiosity about a specific person that built when you knew you liked them and wanted to know more. He asked her questions in return. She learned that he had spent a year in the Northern Territories before coming back to Thornfield, that he had taken on the second beta role not because it was expected of him, but because he had looked at the role and believed he could do it well. She learned that he was not particularly close with most people, but that the few people he was close with had been close with him for many years. She learned that he had opinions about herbal compounds that were more informed than she had expected. "Why?" she said. "Why do you know this?" "I spend time at the station," he said. "You spend time at the station because of me," she said. "You have an excellent supply of field guides," he said. "I read while you finish appointments." "You read my field guides while I'm in appointments?" "You have 6 of them," he said. "The one on winter root systems is particularly good." She looked at him. "I mentioned it to Clara," he said. "She borrowed it." "My patient borrowed my field guide," Mira said. "She asked nicely," he said. "She said she'd been meaning to understand more about what you were using in her treatment." Mira stared at him. Then she put her face in her hands briefly, not in distress, but in the particular way of someone who was absorbing a large amount of information about her own life that she had not known was happening. He was laughing. Quietly, the way he did things quietly, but actually laughing. The kind of laugh that the near miss of a smile was the compressed version of, and she looked up and saw it, and it was a different kind of revelation. Him laughing. Because it was something she would know now. "She reads it every week," he said. "She's going to have opinions. Clara Wells is going to come to my appointments with opinions about my compound choices," Mira said. "Based on independent research," he said. "Yes." She shook her head. She was smiling. She was aware of smiling and let it stay. After dinner he washed up again and she dried, and the kitchen was warm around them, and outside the snow had begun again, light this time, the kind that was more atmosphere than accumulation. She could see it in the window above the sink, small white flakes in the dark, moving past the lit glass. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to be completely honest." "When am I not?" he said. "Fair," she said. "The designation, when the Westmere situation is resolved and the protection is no longer operationally necessary, do you want to convert it to something else?" He turned from the sink. He looked at her directly. "Yes," he said. "What?" she said. "Something that is not a legal arrangement but is an honest one," he said. "Something that we define rather than something the pack law defines for us." She nodded slowly. "And if I say I need more time?" "Then I need more time," he said. "I'm not in a hurry. I've been not in a hurry for 2 years." She looked at him for a moment. She thought about the words honest arrangement. She thought about the particular appeal of something defined rather than assigned. "I don't need more time," she said. He held very still. "I've been paying attention for 3 weeks," she said. "And 3 weeks of paying attention to someone like you it's sufficient. I know what I'm looking at." He breathed. "I want the honest arrangement," she said. "When the time comes, I want to define it." "Together," he said. "Together," she said. She handed him a dish towel and he took it, and they stood at the kitchen sink finishing the washing up in the easy silence of people who have said the important things and do not need to fill the space after them with more words. When everything was done and the kitchen was clean, he got his coat from the chair. She walked him to the door. At the threshold he stopped. He looked at her, the full weight of his attention, the specific quality of it that she had learned was not ordinary, that most people did not look at other people that way, and that she had already started to feel the absence of when he was not in the room. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "Thank you for the field guide information," she said. The near miss of a smile, the full version of it. He leaned forward and pressed a brief and careful kiss to her forehead, not her cheek, not her lips, her forehead. The particular deliberateness of someone choosing the thing that says I am here, and I mean it, and I am not in a hurry, rather than something that demands a response. She felt it in the warm, settled way she felt things that were right. He went out into the snow. She closed the door. She stood with her hand on the latch and the warmth of the kitchen behind her, and the cold of the door in front of her, and she breathed slowly, and she was aware, clearly and without complication, in the simple and direct way of the truest things, that she was very glad she had not left. Mira had never had a conversation with Callum that she had chosen. Every exchange between them had been shaped by circumstance, the Blood Moon assembly, the encounter at the medical station, the brief meeting in the open ground between the station buildings where he had given her his explanation and she had given him his accounting. All of them had happened because the situation had required something, had pushed them toward the same space at the same time. He came to the station on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the delegation had left, and the snow had settled into winter's serious phase. He did not pretend it was anything other than what it was. He waited outside the side door until her last appointment had gone, and then he knocked, and she opened it, and she looked at him standing in the cold, and she said, "Come in." He came in. He looked around the station with the focused attention of someone who had never been inside it, which she realized he had not. He looked at the herb bundles and the field guides and the organized jars on the shelf, and there was something in his expression that was not quite guilt but was in the neighborhood of it, the expression of a person becoming aware of how much of a specific world they had not seen before. "I've wanted to come here for a while," he said. "I didn't know if I was welcome." "You're welcome," she said. "I'm not interested in closing doors that don't need to be closed." He looked at her. He was wearing his usual composed expression, but she had been paying close attention to people's faces for 3 years of medical work and she was good at seeing past composition. Under it, he looked tired, not physically, the kind of tired that was deeper than that. "I want to understand something," he said. "All right," she said. "What you said at the Elders' Hall meeting," he said, "that Callum Voss is a good alpha, that you had no interest in making the personal situation into something larger." He met her eyes. "Did you mean that?" "Yes," she said. "Why?" he said, and he said it like the word had weight, like it was a genuine question rather than a reflexive one. She thought about it. She thought about it seriously, the way she would think about a medical question that deserved a real answer rather than a comfortable one. "Because the thing you did was wrong in a specific way," she said, "not in the way that corrupts everything around it. You made a decision about my life without including me. That was a failure of judgment in a moment. It doesn't tell me you're a bad leader or a bad person. It tells me that you made a bad call under fear." She paused. "You also acknowledged it when I told you it was wrong, and you didn't defend the call. You didn't explain it until I asked you to explain it. That matters." He was very still. "I don't forgive people for good reasons," she said. "I forgive people for the accuracy of their accounting of the wrong. You accounted for it accurately." "Declan told me what you said," Callum said. "That understanding the reason doesn't fix the thing." "He should not have told you that," she said. "He tells me most things," Callum said. "It's one of the things I've been grateful for my entire life, and resented half the time." She looked at him. The complicated thing on his face had clarified slightly. Not resolved, but clarified. The tired had not gone away. "How are you and he?" she asked. A pause. "Better than we were in October," he said. "Still working on it." "Good," she said. "Can I tell you something?" he said. He said it with a particular care, the care of someone who has decided to say something difficult and is not looking for permission, but for acknowledgement that the moment is right. "Yes," she said. "I've been watching my brother for 6 years," he said, "since I took the alpha position and he took the beta role, and we both had to figure out what that meant inside what we already were to each other. And in 6 years I have never seen him look at someone the way he looks at you." She was quiet. "I'm not saying this to give you information you don't have," he said. "I think you know. I'm saying it because I want you to know that I see it, and that I'm glad that it happened. Not glad about how. He looked away. I know how it started. I know the cost. There is always a cost, she said. The question is what you build with what's left after the cost. He looked back at her. That is a very reasonable way to think about things. I've had a good few months of practice, she said. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. He's been different, Callum said. In the good way. The way a person is when they're doing something that matters to them. He paused. He's always been serious, but now the serious has somewhere to go. She thought about that. She thought about Sirius having somewhere to go. She thought about Declan at her kitchen table, at the flat rock, at the cold steps with the too sweet coffee, the 2 years of October and field guides. I should get back, Callum said. He had not sat down. He had stood in the middle of her station for the entire conversation, as though he was aware of the limits of his welcome, and was being careful not to exceed them. I wanted to say what I said. I've been wanting to say it. I'm glad you came, she said. And she meant it, not warmly, not with the particular feeling she had about certain people in her life, but with the honest acknowledgement of a person who has received something accurately given. He nodded. He moved toward the door. Callum, she said. He stopped. The frayed bond, she said. The thing in my chest that, the remnant. How does it work? Does it ever fully resolve? He looked at her. The weight of the question sat in the room between them. I don't know, he said. I've read what there is to read. There isn't much. Rejections are rare enough that the documentation is limited. He paused. I can tell you what I feel on my side. Not pain, not the pull anymore. Something, small, like a scar that has fully closed over. On your side, she said. Yes, he said. On yours, I don't know. I hope less than what it was. Yes, she said, less than what it was. He looked at her one more time, with an expression she thought she understood. The expression of a person carrying the careful awareness of what they had cost someone, not as guilt, but as permanent information, as something they would never put down. Then he went out into the cold and she closed the door behind him. She stood in her station for a moment. She thought about the frayed thing, smaller now. Callum had said a scar, and she thought scar was accurate. Scars changed over time. They did not disappear. They became part of the surface, familiar, not agonizing, incorporated. She thought about what she was building on top of the scar. She went back to work. The afternoon was quiet. She finished 3 preparations she had been meaning to complete for several days. She organized the field guide shelf, which had been rearranged by Clara's borrowing and had not been entirely restored to her preferred system. She sat at the small desk near the window and wrote her notes with the winter light coming through the glass, cold and clear. At 5, she texted Declan, "Your brother came by." The 3 dots appeared. Then, "Are you all right?" She considered this. She considered the specific form of the question. Not what did he say, not what did you discuss, but, "Are you all right?" which was the form of the question that had been asked consistently, by him, throughout all of this. She wrote back, "Yes, better than all right." And then, before she could rethink it, "I'm making dinner. Come if you want." His reply was immediate. "On my way." She locked the station and walked home faster than she usually walked, through the cold, clear winter evening, with the stars beginning to appear in the east and the Pax territory quiet around her, and she felt something she recognized as eagerness, which she had not felt in a long time, which felt like returning to herself. She had the fire built and the kitchen warm by the time he knocked. She opened the door. He was there, coat buttoned, slightly red from the cold, with the presence he carried that was not the presence of an alpha, nothing so large as that, nothing that filled a room from the doorway, but the presence of a specific person she knew well, which was better. "Come in," she said. He came in. She was already moving toward the kitchen. "Tell me about your day," she said. "Patrol meeting this morning," he said, hanging his coat. "Territory review this afternoon. Nothing dramatic." "Good," she said. "Boring is good. Boring is very good," he agreed. He came to the kitchen and looked at what she was making and said, "Garlic?" "Don't," she said. "I said nothing," he said. "You said it again," she said. He went to the cutting board and picked up the knife and started on the onions, which she had been about to do, without being asked. The kitchen was warm. The fire moved in the grate. Outside, the first proper dark of the evening had settled over the territory. The snow in the yard blew white in the early dark, the pine trees still at the edge of the light. She watched him cook for a moment, the easy competence of him, the way he moved in the space they had been sharing, and she thought about Callum saying Sirius has somewhere to go. She thought about what it meant to be someone's somewhere to go. He said you've been different, she said. Declan looked at her briefly. Different how? The good way, she said. He looked back at the onions. A moment passed. He's right, Declan said. She turned back to the stove. They cooked together in the warm kitchen, and the dinner came out well, and the evening was ordinary in all the ways that ordinary evenings were necessary. The filling up of hours with food and conversation, and the familiar presence of another person. And she thought, as she sometimes allowed herself to think now, that she had been right to stay. That she had been right to stay, and right to build, and right to trust the things she had built. The frayed thing in her chest was there. She checked it, the way she sometimes checked it, out of the honesty she owed herself. Smaller, the scar closing, not gone, not the loudest thing in the room. She looked at Declan across her kitchen table. He thought, this is what I chose. She thought, this is what I built. She ate her dinner in the warmth of her own kitchen, with the fire behind her and the winter outside, and she was aware of the difference between the life she had feared she might have after the blood moon and the life she was actually living, and the difference was not small. It was not small at all. The next morning she woke early. Not anxiously. She woke the way she sometimes woke in winter. The particular early waking that came when the room was very dark and very cold and the mind had finished whatever it was doing in sleep and was simply ready. She lay in the quiet for a few minutes, looking at the ceiling, and she felt the frayed thing in her chest and she felt the other thing alongside it, and she measured them the way she measured patient symptoms, with precision, without wishful interpretation. The frayed bond had continued to contract. She thought about the word Callum had used. Scar. She thought it was the right word. A scar was not absence. It was what remained after the wound had closed over itself, changed in texture and color and sensitivity from the surrounding tissue but integrated, permanent in the way only healed things could be permanent. She was not afraid of permanent things. She got up, she made coffee. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the yard in the early dark. The snow settled and still, and she thought about the question she had been circling for several weeks without quite landing on. The designation. What it had been. What it had become. What she wanted it to be. Declan had said, something we define rather than something the pack law defines for us. She had said, together. She had meant it when she said it, and she meant it now. And the question she had been circling was not whether she wanted it. She was clear on that. Had been clear on that for longer than she had officially told herself. But how to say it. How to initiate a conversation about defining a thing when the thing had no name yet and was going to have to be built from the ground up. She thought about how she had always built things. Carefully. From honest materials. She texted him at 7. Are you awake? His reply was immediate, which meant he had been awake for at least as long as she had. Yes. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong, she wrote. I want to talk about the designation. Can you come over? Another immediate reply. Give me 15 minutes. He was at her door in 12. She appreciated that. He came in with snow on his coat from the morning walk, which she had not thought to tell him to avoid, and he stood in her entrance looking at her, with the specific attentiveness he brought to her when something felt important. Coffee? She said. Please, he said. They sat at the kitchen table. She held her mug with both hands. He held his in the same way he always held it, with the particular quality of a person who was paying attention to all of it. The mug and the warmth and the person across from him simultaneously. The designation, she said. Yes, he said. I want to dissolve it, she said. He was very still. Not because of anything that has changed, she said quickly, before he could interpret the stillness in the wrong direction. Because of everything that has changed, the Westmere situation is resolved. The operational need is gone, and I don't want what exists between us to continue to be defined by a legal arrangement that was made under emergency circumstances. He breathed. What do you want it to be defined by? By what we say it is, she said. Without the law in the frame, without the context that made it necessary. He looked at her across the table. He was reading her face with the careful accuracy she trusted. You want a clean start, he said. I want a true start, she said, not a clean one. The history is part of it, and I'm not interested in erasing it, but I want the structure to be ours, not the pack's. Do you understand the difference? Yes, he said. Yes, I do. She nodded. And what does the true start look like? He asked. She thought about it. She thought about what she was actually asking for, underneath the formal language of designations and law. It looks like what we've been doing, she said. Dinner. Conversations. Paying attention to each other. Being honest when something is difficult. She paused, but without the paperwork saying why. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I'll withdraw the designation this week. I'll tell the elders it is no longer operationally required. I'll file my own release of the agreement," she said, concurrently, "so it comes from both sides." "Yes," he said. She looked at him. She thought about 2 years in October and a doorway, and the careful distance of a person who had been waiting for a true circumstance. She thought about what kind of man waited like that. "When the paperwork is done," she said, "and we are not a legal arrangement, ask me properly." He looked at her. "Ask me what?" he said. He said it knowing the answer. She could see that he knew. He was asking her to say it anyway. "Sue be yours," she said, "properly, not because the pack requires a designation. Because you want to and I want to and we chose it." He held her gaze for a long moment. "When the paperwork is done," he said, "I will ask you properly." She nodded. She drank her coffee. He drank his. Outside, the winter morning had arrived while they were talking. Pale gray light through the window, the snow catching it and scattering it, the pine trees standing in their ordinary and indifferent beauty. She looked at all of it, and she thought about the fact that she had lived in this territory for 22 years, and the world it contained was the same world it had always been, and she was a different person in it now, and both of those things were true simultaneously, and neither of them canceled the other. "I want to ask you something," Declan said. He was looking at the window too. "And I want you to answer honestly, even if the answer is difficult." "Always," she said. "The frayed bond," he said. "How is it?" She looked at him. She looked at him the way she looked at the things that mattered to her, carefully, with the full weight of her attention, without performing an answer that was easier than the true one. "Smaller," she said. The word Callum used was scar. "I think that's right." He nodded. Is it present when I'm with you?" she asked. She had not asked this before. She was asking now because the conversation called for it, and she had promised herself that when the conversations called for something she would not step around it. He considered. "I notice it," he said. "Not as competition, as a fact about you, like knowing you hold your pen wrong." She looked at him. "It's part of what you are," he said. "I'm not interested in a version of you that doesn't include your history." She sat with this. She thought about what it meant to be known with your full history present, not despite the difficult parts but including them. "In that case," she said, "you should probably know that I am going to have opinions about the field guide situation." He looked at her. "Clara is going to come to her appointments with ideas about her own treatment," she said, "based on independent research, using my field guide." He blinked. "She borrowed it 2 weeks ago," he said. "She said she was enjoying it." "You loaned out my medical reference materials," Mira said. "She asked nicely," he said. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the perfect composure of a person who understood completely that he was in the wrong and was not going to acknowledge it unless pressed. "She's going to come in with highlighted sections," Mira said. "Probably," he said. "And opinions about root system compounds in winter." "Almost certainly," he said. She put her hand over her mouth. She did not want to laugh again. She had already laughed at him twice, and there was a limit to how much dignity she could cede in a single week. But she was losing this battle. "She asked about you," he said, "while she was borrowing it." "What did she ask?" "Whether you were happy," he said. Simply. Mira was quiet for a moment. "What did you tell her?" she said. He looked at her across the kitchen table. This table. Always this table. The center of the mornings and evenings and conversations that had built what they had built. "I told her yes," he said. "I told her that I believed you were." She felt the warmth in her chest. Not the frayed thing, not the ache, but the other thing. The built thing. The one that had no name yet, because they were going to name it themselves when the paperwork was done, and they were doing this properly. "Yes," she said. "You were right. The paperwork took 4 days. It was not a complicated process. Dissolving a protective designation by mutual agreement was a straightforward legal matter. The kind of pack administrative business that the elders processed without requiring a formal meeting. Declan filed his side of the dissolution on a Wednesday morning. Mira filed hers on Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday evening they received confirmation that the arrangement had been formally closed and removed from the active record. She was at the station when the confirmation came through. She read it twice. She put her phone in her pocket. She finished the compound she was preparing. She told Lena that the designation had been dissolved. Lena said, And that's all," Mira said. "That's the update." Lena looked at her with the particular expression of someone who knew there was more and was waiting for the more to arrive. "We're having dinner tonight," Mira said. Lena made the small, satisfied sound. "You're insufferable," Mira said. "I'm informed," Lena said. "There is a difference." Mira finished her shift. She went home. She changed again. Not dramatically. Not in the way of someone performing an occasion, but in the ordinary way of someone who wanted to feel comfortable in the clothes they were wearing for a thing that mattered. She built the fire. She put the kettle on, not because she was going to make tea immediately, but because the sound and the process of it settled her. She was not nervous. She was aware of the distinction between nervous and something else, something closer to the feeling of standing at the edge of something you have been working toward for a long time and are now arriving at, which had its own particular quality that was not quite anxiety but was not quite calm either. He knocked at 7. She opened the door. He was not wearing his usual dark coat. He was wearing a different one, slightly better, she thought, the kind of small adjustment that communicated effort without announcing it. He was carrying a single stem of something evergreen with small white berries, which he held out when she opened the door. She looked at it. "Holly," she said. "It's winter," he said. There wasn't a great deal of choice. She took it. She looked at it for a moment, at the dark glossy leaves and the white berries, and she thought about the kind of man who went to find something to bring to the door, and found the thing that was actually available rather than manufacturing something impossible. "Come in," she said. He came in. She put the holly in a glass of water on the kitchen windowsill, which was where she put things she wanted to see. He stood in the entrance and looked at her kitchen, and then he looked at her. "Mira Langston," he said. She turned to face him. He was standing in the middle of her kitchen floor, coat still on, and he was looking at her with the full weight of his attention, which by now she knew was a significant thing, a real thing, the particular quality of a person who was completely present. "The designation has been dissolved," he said. "Yes," she said. "So," he said. He paused, a pause that was deliberate, that gave the moment the space it needed. "I am asking you, not because the pack requires it, not because the circumstances made it necessary, because I want to and because I believe you want to and because 2 years of paying attention to a person is enough to be certain about certainty." She held his gaze. "Will you be mine?" he said. Properly, honestly, chosen. She thought about the first time she had heard those 2 words. "I reject you," quiet as a door being closed, and she thought about how much territory there was between those words and these ones, and about all the ordinary things that had been built in that territory, the coffee and the cold steps and the patching together of a life after something had been broken. "Yes," she said. She said it the way she said the things she meant, plainly, without decoration, with the precision of someone who knew what the word cost, and was paying it willingly. He was still for a moment. Then he crossed the kitchen and he was in front of her, and his hands came up to her face, both of them this time, careful and sure, and she put her hands over his, and she looked at him from very close. He kissed her. Not the brief and careful press to her forehead from the week before. This was a real thing, full and unhurried, the kind of kiss that had the weight of 2 years and 3 weeks, and all the conversations in between. She leaned into it the way she had leaned into the palm against her cheek, the small motion of something that had been held still for a long time, choosing, finally, to move. When they separated, she said nothing for a moment. She did not need to. He rested his forehead against hers. His hands were still at her face. She felt the warmth of him and the cold of the evening still on his coat and the particular texture of this moment, which was ordinary in all the ways the best things were ordinary. No thunder, no detonation, no biological certainty. Simply 2 people in a warm kitchen who had built something true and were now standing inside it. "You need to take your coat off," she said. "We're having dinner." He laughed, the full version of the laugh, the real one. She went to the stove. He took off his coat. They made dinner together. She at the stove, he at the cutting board, the easy choreography of it by now familiar enough that they moved around each other without incident, and without the particular self-consciousness of people who were still learning the geography. The kitchen smelled of food and the fire and the faint cold air from the brief opening of the door. "Tell me something about October," she said. He looked up from the cutting board. "Which part of October?" "The appointment," she said. "Marcus and the broken arm. What were you thinking in the doorway?" He was quiet for a moment. She watched him decide whether to be honest about this, and decide yes, in the way he always decided yes. "I thought you were remarkable," he said. "Not for a single thing, not for how you looked or a specific thing you said. Just the whole of it, the way you moved through the room, the way Marcus trusted you immediately, which Marcus does not do easily, the way you explained something difficult without making it frightening." He paused. "I thought, There is a person who knows exactly what she's doing and is completely uninterested in whether anyone is watching. She looked at the pot. She kept her eyes on it because she was not entirely sure what her face was doing. And I thought, he said, slightly more quietly, that I would like to be someone who was paying attention to her. And then you went home and looked up pen grip mechanics, she said. Not that night, he said. But eventually. It came up, he said. She stirred the pot. She was smiling, and she let herself smile because there was no longer any reason to manage it. Marcus is going to be insufferable when he finds out, she said. Marcus is already insufferable, Declan said. This will simply give him new material. Does he know? She asked. He suspects, Declan said. He mentioned it approximately once a week since October, not this October, last October. She turned around and looked at him. A year, she said. At least, he said. He looked completely unbothered. Declan, she said. He's very perceptive, he said, for a person who walked into a doorframe while looking at you. She stared at him. The broken arm, he said. It was not entirely the patrol. She processed this. Your patrol partner broke his arm walking into a doorframe? He's fine, Declan said. Fully healed. Excellent care. She turned back to the stove and laughed until she had to put the spoon down. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, the same table. Always the same table. She lit a candle because it was winter and it was dark, and the candle made the table feel like the center of something. He talked about Marcus and the patrol rotation and the small internal politics of the PAC's northern sector that she had never been privy to but found she was interested in now, in the way she was interested in his life generally. She told him about Clara's most recent appointment, during which Clara had, as predicted, brought the borrowed field guide and had opinions about the winter route compound that were more informed than Mira had expected. She had dog-eared pages, Mira said. She's enthusiastic, Declan said. She made notes in the margins, Mira said. He looked at her. In pencil, she said. She asked if that was all right. What did you say? He said. I said yes, Mira said, because she had been so careful about it, and clearly loved it. She shook her head. I'm going to have to get her own copy. I'll get her one, Declan said. She looked at him. He was completely serious. She's going to add that to the list of things she likes about you, Mira said. She likes me already? He said. He looked genuinely pleased. She told me you have good hands, Mira said. She mentioned that to me too, he said. I wasn't sure what it meant. It means she trusts you, Mira said. Clara reads people through their hands. She's been doing it for 40 years. She considers it reliable. He looked at his own hands briefly. She watched him do it and felt the warmth of it, the small intimate moment of a person reassessing something ordinary about themselves through new information. After dinner they sat at the table over the last of the tea and she said, I want to tell you something. All right, he said. The first night, she said, the blood moon, when I walked out of the clearing and went to the river, I was alone for a long time before you came. And when you came I didn't know why you'd come, and I wasn't sure I wanted anyone there. She paused. But I was glad. I noticed it. I was glad. He was quiet. I've been thinking about that, she said. About the fact that the first person I was glad to have near me, after the hardest thing that happened that night, was you. Before I knew you. Before I had any reason to be glad. What do you think it means? He said. I think, she said carefully, that something in me recognized the quality of the way you arrived. Quiet. Not asking anything, just there. She looked at him. That quality hasn't changed. He held her gaze. Good, he said. The candle burned low. The fire moved. Outside, the winter night was fully settled, cold and clear and full of stars above the pine trees. She could see them through the kitchen window when she turned her head, the steady light of them, the enormous indifferent dark between them. Stay for a while, she said. He stayed. They sat at the kitchen table and talked past midnight, the way people talked when time had stopped being something that needed to be managed, and the evening was warm around them, and the candle burned all the way down, and when the snow began again outside they watched it through the window together without going anywhere. She walked him to the door past midnight. He put on his coat in the entrance the way he always did, the careful and unhurried way of a person who had somewhere to go but was not in a hurry to be away. She stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him, and she thought about the long arc of the evening, from the knock at the door and the sprig of holly to this, past midnight in the warm quiet of her house. I want to tell you something, she said. He paused with his coat half buttoned. I'm going to ask you to come for dinner next week, she said, and the week after that, and the week after that. He looked at her. I want you to know, she said, that I'm not building this because I needed it. I'm building it because I chose it. There is a significant difference, and I needed to say it plainly so we both knew. He held her gaze for a moment, then he said, I know. Good, she said. He finished buttoning his coat. He came to where she was standing and he pressed a brief kiss to her forehead again, the same as last week, the deliberate and unhurried version, and she closed her eyes for a moment in the warmth of it. Next week, he said. Yes, she said. He went out into the cold. She locked the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment and she heard the third board creak under his weight as he walked down the path, the way it always did, the familiar sound of a person she knew going away and going to come back. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and she listened to the silence of the house around her, which was the good kind of silence, the inhabited kind, the kind that still held the shape of an evening that had been full. She felt the frayed thing in her chest, which was present and very small now, like a word in a language she was no longer speaking, like something that had been translated into something else. She felt the other thing, the built thing, warm and without a name still and very much there. She thought about the Blood Moon Assembly. How many weeks ago now? Though it felt like a different season of her life rather than simply another autumn. She thought about the hook in her ribs and the detonation and the two words delivered quietly across firelight. She thought about how she had walked out and gone to the river and how the night had turned, imperceptibly, on the arrival of a person who came because someone should have. She thought about all the ordinary things that had happened since then. Coffee, cold steps, medical appointments, a sprig of holly and a glass of water on the kitchen windowsill. She thought about what her life looked like from the outside of that night, how it might have appeared to someone watching, a low-ranked Omega, rejected at the Blood Moon, taken under formal protection by the Alpha's brother, eventually dissolving the arrangement to build something that did not require a name from the Pack's law. From the outside it might have looked like loss followed by consolation, like settling, like making the best of. From the inside it looked entirely different. From the inside it looked like arriving. She fell asleep to the sound of the snow beginning again outside her window, the soft weight of it settling on the roof, on the pines, on the flat rock by the river where she had sat in the dark and not known yet what was about to be built. The snow covered everything with the particular tenderness of something that did not know it was beautiful and did not need to. She slept without dreaming. In the morning she woke, and the frayed thing was there, and the built thing was there, and the kitchen window showed her a yard full of fresh snow, and the holly on the sill, with its white berries and dark leaves. And she got up and made coffee, and stood at the window and looked at all of it. She texted Declan, "Good morning." His reply came immediately, "Good morning." She drank her coffee. She looked at the snow. She thought, "This is what I chose." She thought, "This is what I built." She went to work. The station was cold in the early morning, and she adjusted the heating and started the kettle and opened the supply log for the week. Lena arrived 12 minutes after she did, which was Lena's usual timing, and said "good morning" in a tone that contained an entire conversation's worth of unsaid things. And Mira said good morning back and did not give her anything more. Lena lasted 4 minutes. "Well," Lena said. "We're having dinner next week," Mira said. And the week after that," Mira said. Lena looked at her. She looked at Mira's face, which Mira was aware was giving more away than she was saying aloud, and Lena's expression shifted into something that was not the satisfied sound she usually made but something softer than that. "Good," Lena said. "Just that." Mira nodded. They went to work. 3 appointments in the morning, all routine. The elder with the joint condition had a good week. The new compound concentration was holding. A patrol wolf with a minor infection she caught early and treated before it developed into anything larger. A younger pack member, 19 years old, who had never been to the medical station before and was too embarrassed to explain fully what was wrong, and whom Mira spoke to carefully and without judgment, until the real problem emerged and turned out to be manageable, and for which she provided both a treatment and the particular relief of being told it was going to be fine. She liked this work. She had always liked it. At midday she sat at the small desk by the window and ate her lunch in the pale winter light, and she thought about the conversation she had had the previous night, the one she had told Declan she had been saving, about the blood moon and the river and the particular quality of being glad about his arrival before she had any reason to be. She thought about what he had said, "Something in you recognized the quality." She thought that was probably right. She thought about the quality, quiet, not asking, just present. She had recognized it at the river. She had recognized it at her door before dawn. She had recognized it across the pack meeting and the elders' hall and the many evenings at her kitchen table. It had not changed. She thought that was what she meant when she said she trusted it. Not that she knew the future, she was too practical to claim knowledge of the future, but that she had evaluated the quality of a specific person over time, with careful attention, and found it consistent. And consistency over time under varied circumstances was the closest thing to certainty that honesty allowed. She thought she was working with as much certainty as a person could reasonably have. She found she was content with that. She finished her lunch. She went back to work. The afternoon brought 3 more appointments and a supply delivery she had to sign for, and a minor disagreement between 2 of the patrol wolves in the Outer East Block over a medical question that turned out to be, as Mira suspected medical disagreements usually were, actually about something else entirely. She resolved it with the same patience she brought to the complex cases, finding the actual problem underneath the presented one and addressing that. Lena watched her do it and said, afterwards, "You're very good at this." "It's just listening," Mira said. "You make it look easy," Lena said. "It's not easy," Mira said, "but it's the most important part." She closed the station at 5. She walked home through the snow, which had settled into a kind of permanence now, the season established, winter making itself understood. She knew these paths in all their versions, the summer green, the autumn copper, the bare winter gray, and now this, the white and the sharp air and the early dark. She knew them the way she knew everything she had lived with long enough, completely, with the particular intimacy of familiarity that was not boredom but belonging. She thought about what it meant to belong to a place. She thought about what it meant to belong more broadly, to a community, to a person. She had been a person who was careful about belonging. She had been careful because belonging to things required you to be vulnerable to them, required you to let the loss of them matter, which meant the thing itself had to matter, which was a risk. She had managed risk for 22 years with a great deal of precision. She thought about what it meant to have decided to risk it. She thought, I did not decide to risk it. I decided I wanted the thing more than I wanted to avoid the risk. She thought that was a different kind of decision, the better kind. She went home. She made dinner for one because it was Tuesday and Declan was not coming until next week, and she was a person who made dinner for herself on ordinary evenings, without waiting for company to make it worthwhile. She ate at the kitchen table with a book from the shelf, one she had been meaning to read for months, and the fire behind her, and the holly on the windowsill, and the snow outside. At 8 o'clock she texted Declan, "I told Lena this morning." He replied, "What did she say?" She wrote back, "Good, just that. Good." He wrote, "That's Lena." She smiled at her phone. She put it down. She read her book. The evening passed the way good evenings passed. Slowly, in the best sense. The way something passes when you do not want it to end and also do not need it to. She was not waiting for the evening to become something else. She was in it. She was exactly where she was, in her warm kitchen, in her house at the edge of the territory she had never left and did not intend to leave, with the complicated and ordinary facts of her life arranged around her like the things in a room that have been there so long they have become the room. She thought about the wolf she had been at the Blood Moon Assembly, the one standing at the edge of the clearing in the firelight, 22 years old, alone, feeling something enormous and not knowing yet what would come of it. She thought about all the versions of herself since then, the one on the flat rock at the river, the one who opened the door before dawn, the one who signed the paperwork and then dissolved it, the one who said yes properly to the right person in the right kitchen at the right time. She thought that she was glad for all of them, even the ones who had been afraid, even the one who had not cried. She thought, I built this. She thought, it is mine. She put the book down and listened to the quiet of her house, and the snow outside, and the fire behind her, and she was glad, without qualification, that she had stayed. The spring came late that year. February stayed hard and cold well into March, the snow refusing to release the territory, the pines holding their dark green against the white sky. Mira did not mind. She had work that did not stop for seasons, and the medical station stayed busy through winter with the ordinary accumulation of cold weather complaints and the particular stubbornness of injuries that healed slower when the body was spending resources on staying warm. She had 2 standing dinners a week now, Tuesdays and Fridays. They had arrived at this without deciding it formally, the way good arrangements arrived, through repetition and the mutual absence of objection, through 2 people discovering that the pattern was one they wanted to keep. On the evenings she was not at dinner with Declan, she worked, or read, or went to the river if the weather permitted, and sat on the flat rock the way she had always sat on it, which she had told him about once, and he had said he would like to see sometime, and she had said whenever you want, simply. The flat rock had been hers for a long time, and she found she could imagine it being shared without losing its quality, which told her something about how she felt about the sharing. Lena had a theory. She always had a theory, which was that Mira had been more afraid of being happy than she had ever been afraid of being hurt, and that what she had done over the previous 5 months was prove herself wrong. Mira had considered this carefully and concluded that Lena was probably right about 60% of it, which was higher than most theories achieved. The other 40%, she thought, was simpler. She had stayed in a difficult situation long enough to let it become something else. She had done that not through any particular wisdom but through the ordinary stubbornness of a woman who did not leave things she had built. The Pax Eastern Territory had been quiet since the Westmere Agreement. No further incursions. No further mapping runs. The corridor rights had been reduced in writing and the written terms had held, partly because Callum had negotiated well, and partly because the Ridgeback Pack, Helen Marsh and her steady 12-year leadership, had filed a formal notice of cross-pack solidarity with Thornfield that made Westmere's expansion plans significantly more complicated. Callum had told her this over a brief conversation at the Pack's March Assembly, not a blood moon, simply a regular convening, the kind that happened 3 times a year for administrative business. He had told her in the particular way he had been telling her things since October, directly, without excess, with the careful acknowledgement of a man who knew exactly what he owed her and was paying it in the currency of respect. She had told him the quarter root compound she had been using on the joint cases seemed to have broad applications, and she was writing up her findings, and he had said he would make sure the formal report went to the Pack's Health Council, and she had said thank you, and they had gone their separate ways at the assembly, in the easy manner of 2 people who had found a way to be in the same world without it being a problem. She was thinking about this, about the way things that began badly could end up arranged tolerably if everyone involved was willing to be accurate about what had happened and to build from there, when the spring finally came. It came on a Wednesday in the 3rd week of March, and it came all at once the way spring sometimes did in the mountains, a specific morning when the air changed and the snow began to pull back from the southern-facing slopes, and the birds returned to the trees around the station in numbers that felt like an announcement. She was walking to work and she stopped on the path and she stood in the changed air and she breathed it, and something in her that had been braced all winter released. Declan was at the station when she arrived. He had not been expected until Friday. She had not known he was coming. He was sitting on the side step with a cup of coffee from the canteen, reading one of her field guides, which she had stopped being surprised by, and he looked up when she came around the corner, and something in his expression shifted in the way she knew by now was his version of happy. "You're not supposed to be here until Friday," she said. "I was in the East Sector," he said. "Patrol review." "And you stopped," she said. "I stopped," he said. He held up the coffee cup. "I have one for you too. It's probably lukewarm." She took the cup. She sat on the step beside him. She looked at the spring morning, the softening light, the birds in the trees, the patches of bare earth where the snow had gone. "What are you reading?" she said. He showed her the cover. The Winter Root Study, the one Clara had borrowed and dog-eared and returned with margin notes. "Clara's been in it," she said. "I know," he said. "Her commentary is excellent. She wrote in my field guide. In pencil," he said. "Very neat." Mira looked at the page he had open. There was a small, precise note in the margin in Clara's handwriting, the observation that the winter variant of the compound seemed to have a faster effect than the summer preparation, which was something Mira had been noticing in her patient data and had not yet confirmed with another source. She stared at it. "She's right," she said. "I thought she might be," Declan said. "She's been paying attention," Mira said. "She has a lot of time," he said. And then, with complete seriousness, "I got her a copy. Her own. She can annotate it as much as she wants." Mira looked at him. "She cried a little," he said. "Not in a distressing way. The way people do when something small is exactly right. She sat with this. She thought about Clara Wells, 74, who came to the station because she was lonely and had found, in the process of coming, a community of sorts. Mira and the station, and now Declan and the field guides. She thought about the unexpected forms that belonging took. "Thank you," she said. "She's important to you," he said. "That makes her important to me." She looked at him. It was a simple statement. He had said it without emphasis, without making it into something that needed to be noticed, which was why she noticed it. She had been hearing statements like this from him for months now, small, precise, carrying more than their surface level without performing the weight. She had been accumulating them. She had them all. The way she had the details of patients she cared for, not formally catalogued but entirely present, available when she reached for them. She heard the door of the station open. Lena put her head out. "Oh," Lena said. "You're both here." "I stopped," Declan said. "He was in the east sector," Mira said. Lena looked between them. She said, "I'll start the kettle," and went back inside. "She's doing the thing where she's delighted and covering it with practical activity," Declan said. "She's been doing that since November," Mira said. "She's very good at it," he said. "She's not good at it at all," Mira said. "But she tries." He smiled. The full version. She had stopped cataloging the full smiles because they were frequent enough now to be a regular feature of her days rather than notable events. They sat on the step in the spring morning and drank their coffee. Lukewarm, too sweet, the way the canteen always made it, and she leaned slightly against his shoulder, which was the kind of thing she did now, small and without announcement, and he shifted his weight toward hers in return, the equal and uncomplicated response of two people who had learned the geometry of each other. The territory came alive around them. Birds, the creak of the pines in the new season air. From somewhere on the main path, the sound of the morning patrol returning, voices carried on the wind, the ordinary and constant noise of a pack doing its ordinary and constant work. "I want to show you something on Friday," she said. "What?" he said. "The flat rock," she said. "At the river." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been telling you about it," she said. "You said whenever you want." "Yes," he said. "I did." "Friday," she said, "before dinner, if the weather holds." "Friday," he agreed. She finished her coffee. She stood. She dusted off her coat. "Lena has made the kettle," she said. "Go," he said. "I'll see you Friday." She went inside. The station was warm. The kettle had boiled. Lena was arranging the morning's appointment records with the focused attention of someone not looking at the door. Mira took off her coat and hung it up, and she went to the supply desk and she opened the morning's record book. "The spring came today," Lena said, not looking up. "Yes," Mira said. "Good timing," Lena said. Mira said. She could feel Lena not looking at her with great intensity. "The flat rock on Friday," Mira said. "I'm taking him." Lena stopped what she was doing. She looked up. Her expression was the one she saved for things that actually moved her. Not the satisfied sound, not the delighted covering, but the real thing underneath. "Good," she said. "Just that again." "I know," Mira said. They went to work. The morning was busy with the kind of spring appointments that always arrived when the season turned, the accumulated small complaints of people who had been enduring things through the winter months and now had room to address them. She saw 8 patients before noon, more than usual for a weekday, and found she was glad for the volume, the physical presence of useful work. In the afternoon, she wrote up the quarter root compound findings she had been compiling. It took 3 hours and produced 6 pages of clear, careful documentation, the kind she did well, the kind that built on patient records and observation, and the systematic thinking she had been applying to her work since she began. She attached Clara's field guide annotations as a supplementary observation, attributed correctly. She thought Clara would be pleased to be cited. She sent the report to Callum's administrative address for forwarding to the Health Council, with a brief note. He replied within an hour. "Excellent work. Council will review this month." She filed the exchange and went back to the supply list. At 5, she closed the station. She walked home in the spring evening, real spring now, the air carrying something new in it, the particular quality of a season that had arrived and meant to stay. She walked through the eastern residential area and through the stretch of older pine before her path diverged from the main road, and she noted the things she always noted, the state of the trail surface after winter, the new growth starting at the edges of the path, the sound of the pack's territory returning to its active season volume. She turned onto her path. She saw the light was on in her kitchen. She had not left the light on. She stopped. She thought, Declan has a key. She had given it to him in January, not with ceremony. She had handed it to him one evening when he was leaving and said, "I'm going to be at the station late next Thursday. You could start dinner if you wanted to." And he had taken the key and said yes, and that had been that. She went to the door. She could smell dinner cooking through the wood. She opened the door. He was at her stove, her kitchen warm around him, the spring evening light coming through the window above the sink and catching the holly on the sill. She had kept replacing it, a small piece each week, because she had decided she liked it there, He turned when she came in. "I thought Friday," she said. "I finished early," he said. The patrol review was brief. He looked at her. "Is this all right?" She looked at the warm kitchen and the man in it, and the dinner already underway, and she thought about the version of herself who had sat on the flat rock in the dark at the beginning of all this, alone, and not crying, and not knowing what would come after. "Yes," she said, "this is exactly all right." She hung up her coat. She went to the kitchen and she looked at what he was making and she said, "Is that the garlic?" "The garlic is fine," he said. "It's going to burn," she said. "It's going to have character," he said. "Declan." "Mira," he said. She reached past him and adjusted the heat. He watched her do it with the absolute equanimity of a person who had been letting her be right for months and had made his peace with it. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she said. She got the second pot from the shelf. She added water. She set it beside him on the stove, and she moved through her own kitchen with the ease of a person in a room they know completely. And he moved through it with the ease of a person who had learned the room alongside her. And they made dinner together in the spring evening, with the kitchen warm and the light changing and the first real warmth of the year coming through the window glass. Later they sat at the kitchen table with the last of dinner between them, and the evening settled softly outside, and she looked across the table at him, this specific man, in this specific room, at this table where everything had been said and decided and built, and she thought about what Lena had said. Afraid of being happy, proving herself wrong. She thought about what proving herself wrong felt like. It felt like this, like the warm kitchen, and the field guide, with margin notes, and the flat rock on Friday, and the key on the hook by the door. Like the dinner already started and the garlic adjusted and the spring arriving finally after a long winter. It felt like the thing she had stayed to build. It felt, simply and without complication, like hers. She reached across the table. She put her hand over his. He turned his hand and held hers. He turned his hand and held hers. Outside, the territory of Thornfield Pack went about its evening. The patrols and the families and the old paths between the old trees, the river running fast at the eastern boundary, the flat rock waiting for Friday. The ordinary and continuing life of a place that was no one's in particular and everyone's who stayed. Inside, in the warm kitchen, with the candle burning and the spring outside the glass, two people held each other's hands in the comfortable silence of people who had built something real and were simply, without drama, living inside it. The frayed thing in her chest was there. Smaller now, a scar, healed over, in the way things healed, completely but permanently. The texture changed, the history present, the pain gone. The other thing was there too. The built thing, the chosen thing, the thing with no name from the law because it did not need one. She felt both of them and she did not choose between them and she did not need to, because she was a person who had learned that the most honest lives were the ones that held all their truths simultaneously, without editing the difficult ones out, without letting any single one become the whole story. This was her whole story. She was in it. And she was, without reservation and without qualification, exactly where she had decided to be.